Britain is told to prepare for the fall of Putin as America's top diplomat warns of cracks in the Russian regime.
Good morning, it's 6 o'clock on Monday, the 26th of June. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn Holmes and Ellie Costello.
Well, wherever you're watching from, wherever you're listening, you're very welcome on board. It is going to be a cracker of a day, and it starts here. Here's our lead story this morning. Britain must prepare for the sudden collapse of Russia, according to government assessments following an attempted coup. It comes as the US Secretary of State warns that the insurrection shows cracks in Putin's power.
People are more likely to die from treatable conditions in Britain than in other rich countries. That's according to a major new study which links the problem to a lack of resources in the NHS. We'll speak to the Minister for Social Care later in the programme.
The Duchess of York has undergone treatment for breast cancer after it was caught early during a routine mammogram. Sarah Ferguson returned to Windsor this weekend where she's recovering with family.
The Prince of Wales will unveil a plan to eradicate homelessness today with a pledge to make it his life's work to ensure that everyone has a safe and secure home.
And after winning the Queen's Club Championship, does Carlos Alcaraz have what it takes to win Wimbledon? Paul Coit here with the sport.
Oh, I think he does. He's only 20 years old, and it'll be a Djokovic final at Wimbledon, trust me. Also, the Women's Ashes is on a knife edge, and Saudi Arabia are trying to take over yet another sport.
Well, what, your slot?
My slot, yeah, they're coming in for me.
The Saudis are
They're coming in. They're paying me big money that way, but I've got to tell you.
OK, all right, my friend. And it was pretty hot over the weekend, wasn't it?
It was pretty hot. It was the hottest day of the year so far yesterday, and we're going to have your latest weather update as conditions begin to turn.
After a hot and humid weekend, Monday offers many of us something a little bit fresher. Join me later for the full weather forecast.
Get underway with our top story. Internal government assessments have warned that the UK should prepare for the sudden collapse of the Putin regime following an attempted coup by Wagner Group mercenaries.
Well, yesterday, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken said the insurrection showed that cracks are beginning to show in Vladimir Putin's power and warned that this isn't the end of the story.
How did that story start? Where does it go to? Defence editor of the Evening Standard. Can't wait to talk to Robert Fox. Robert, did you see this coming, my friend?
I saw it coming about 3 days before it happened because I was finding I was getting very interesting remarks from in and around the defence and government circles. Actually, the Brits and the Americans began to suspect something was up in the aftermath of the bridge being blown by the British missiles, Storm Shadow. And at the same time, you may remember that Prigozhin started making his move. He started accusing the hierarchy in Moscow of running a war in Ukraine to stuff the pockets of the oligarchs from what they could seize from Kiev. We knew trouble was on its way. And as you were rightly saying, following Antony Blinken, it looks as if the trouble isn't over.
And what do you mean? What do you mean by that? It looks as though Putin suppressed the trouble. He's either bought this guy off, this guy who leads the Wagner Group. What do you think the deal has been? What was the deal that has been done? What do you think it was?
Well, nobody really knows because there have been two very dubious sources who have said that he was paid a bit of money, that part of the Wagner would disintegrate, would dissolve, and part of them would join the Russian armed forces. He would go to Belarus. It's only Dmitry Peskov, not very well known for 100% accurate truth-telling, the spokesman for Putin, and Mr. Lukashenko, the president of Belarus, who's been a very dodgy figure in the past and has a lot of bubbling protest in his own country for his last as they see it, stolen election. Why I think everybody, from what we can see, is so concerned is look at the body language or the non-body language of Mr. Putin. Of the principal players, it's a huge game of now you see me, now you don't. Once Rostov-on-Don and Voronezh were taken over very peacefully, if it really was a takeover, does that look like a takeover that you're looking at in the picture of Prigozhin there? It was absolutely clear that he was panicked. Putin. He goes on telly, he says, stab in the back. This is just like 1917. It's what's happened over again in Russian history. I'm going to, these people are traitors. This is absolute treason. We will crack down hard. And then we have to wait several hours to hear that a convoy is turned back on the road of Moscow. Money has been paid. But perhaps the most significant images were the Wagner group leaving Rostov-on-Don with flowers in the barrels of the tanks and crowds cheering them. Putin, visibly, almost for the first time, is quite clearly, to the Russian television viewing public, is not Mr. Popular.
There's so many aspects to all of this, James, that I mean, Putin's got an air force. The Wagner Group don't have. They're 25,000 in number. Would they really have been able to stage that coup? What have they got that the Russians don't have?
What they have is momentum, and they have an ability to do Putin's dirty work. And that's quite clearly what they were doing in some of the most dreadful fighting in Ukraine. They've been going as a going concern for about 10 years and done a lot of the really rough stuff in Syria, in Libya, and of course in West Africa, where they have been stuffing their pockets, taking over things like gold mines. So that's what they have. But where you are absolutely right, look at the non-performers. One of the most staggering things over the past 16 months is the poor performance of the Russian Air Force. Whose side are they on? They're getting a bit committed to ground attack against the advancing offensive of the Ukrainians, where they've been a bit effective. But actually, the Russians have been relying a lot on their attack helicopters. They have worked in making life difficult for the Ukrainian advance, but they haven't stopped it. What is happening, as I said, all the people we're not seeing at the moment. We've not seen Putin again. You would have expected he would come out with a big statement. This is what's going to happen. We're all together and we're fighting for Russia's national survival now. We haven't heard from Shoigu, the defense minister, who Prigozhin criticized. He said that was his main target of criticism with the commander-in-chief, Gerasimov. We haven't heard from him either. The Russians are going on attacking Ukraine with drones, with fighting on the front line, as if they're on autopilot. This is why this is going to develop almost hour by hour over the next 2 or 3 days. And it looks as if Putin, if he's ever been in the woods, isn't out of the woods yet. And that's why Blinken is warning. By the way, this is a prime aim of the Ukrainian counteroffensive. It wasn't just to get boots and tanks and barrels and Leopard 2s and Challenger tanks on the ground a few kilometers up the road. I'm not being facetious there, because that is really hard work. That's an important part of it. But it was to shake the regime, to shake the command of the Russians, to make them think again. And in ways that we don't quite understand fully yet, they've done it.
And Robert, what does this mean for the war in Ukraine? Because, I mean, Ukrainians watching over the weekend would have been quite pleased, wouldn't they, to have seen the Russians tearing each other apart. But there'll be concern now, won't there, about how Putin will have taken this. He's been seen to look weak in Russia, and there is going to be concern that he will now ramp things up in Ukraine.
Yes, Isabel. I think the most dangerous point, if I was to point at a place on the map, is Zaporizhia again, the Zaporizhia power plant, because we heard this for weeks and months about the Kakhovka Dam before they blew it, and it's absolutely clear now that the Russians blew it. There were pre-positioned explosives. It took a lot to blow that dam. We've got the same round several of the cooling towers in the Zaporizhia power plant. They've been mined. They've got explosives around it. Now, if Putin goes, and he would be going really bad if he did that, because the pollutant effect, think of the Chernobyl disaster in '86, this would be many, many times greater, according to the International Atomic Energy Authority. It's that kind of thing that if he's desperate and wants a desperate move, I think we've got to be ready to see them do that. And I think the Ukrainians are well aware of that too.
And would the Ukrainians be able to strike any advances? Could they take advantage of what the Wagner Group have done here?
Yes, because I think that what they will find is there are a lot of reluctant Russian troops to get into the dirty fighting and the horrible holes that the Wagner Group got, particularly on the Bakhmut front. There is an advantage there, but don't expect the main initiative to come full frontal. It won't come in the center of the front. I think it will come round the edges. And what Mr. Putin knows, and it's the jewel in his crown, his real success in 2014, I think Crimea is looking very vulnerable. I don't see it being invaded, but I see it being strangled. We've already seen moves. There's no fresh water from the west after the Kakhovka Dam and after the bridge was blown. One of the main supply routes to and from Crimea and to the front has been cut.
I know we're talking military matters, Robert, and this may not be your area of expertise, but diplomacy. Would there be anyone on the Putin side of things, on the Russian side of things, who would be suing for peace? So if Putin is sidelined, he faces an election next year, but if he goes before that, would there be any chance of the diplomatic map changing?
Look, this war is not just exclusively military. It's about perception, it's about information, it's the first digital war, and again, it's a game of shadows. So diplomacy, as you put it, is very much part of the game. I would think that this has been in train for some time. Probes, leaks. It's amazing what the perception has been over the past few days and weeks. And it is quite clear, not this last weekend, but the weekend before, London and Washington knew something was up, that all was not well in the house of Putin. So they will be looking for that. But what Zelensky, and particularly his commanders, will be saying to the West, don't give up now. We've shown vulnerabilities in protection from close air attack on the front line. Come and help us, bring your stuff in. And by the way, you've been very generous with advice, with kit, but get your act together. Be coherent, be consistent, have all these systems that will work together, help us build up our own defense industries, because you've got to have a rolling plan for months and for reconstruction and development, as we know, for years to come. And there is big fear in Kiev that, governments, particularly like the British and the American, are going to pull back, say we haven't got enough money, we've run out of ammunition stocks. And I think that's going to be the main subject at the Vilnius, Lithuania NATO summit next month. Stick with the program. The main effort for all our values and existence as a NATO treaty is Ukraine.
Robert, fascinating talking to you. Really good to hear your analysis on things. Robert is the defence editor of the Evening Standard and friend of this programme. That's the Russian-Ukraine situation following that attempted coup by the Wagner mercenary group. Thank you, Robert Fox.
He's always good value, isn't he? Always very good.
But I mean, who would have thought? Who could have seen this twist? And to think that a private enterprise exists of 25,000 really well-armed, really well-facilitated soldiers exists for hire to anybody in the world.
And the Russian people, at least what Robert Fox was telling us there, they love them. I mean, they were being greeted by flowers and people wanting to take selfies with them. It's not a good look for Putin, is it? Be really interesting to know what happens next, because it's on the front page of the Hour this morning. Nobody knows where he is. He's gone silent since then. So it's going to be really interesting. Do let us know what you think at home. gbviews@gbnews.com.
People in Britain are less likely to survive treatable conditions such as breast cancer or strokes than those in other rich nations, a new study has found.
Yes, the review by the King's Fund linked the issue to below-average funding for the NHS, resulting in a lack of equipment and staff.
Now, this follows the Prime Minister's announcement of a 15-year plan to support the NHS workforce, saying he feels a great responsibility to ensure the health service survives.
Well, James Hill, political correspondent at The Spectator, joins us in the studio now to tell us more. Good morning to you, James. Really good to see you this morning. This doesn't make for good reading, does it? That essentially, if you live in the UK, you will find it much harder to survive things like breast cancer because of the state of our NHS. It's not good, is it?
Yeah, quite. So this is a major study of 19 different countries, and I think the headline figure which everyone will alight upon is the fact that the UK came 16th and 18th respectively for preventable and treatable causes of mortality. We know this is a long-term problem. As far back as 2014, there was a Commonwealth Fund study which showed that the UK, the major black mark entity at UK NHS was the fact that it struggled to keep people alive. So I know this is a long-term thing. It's worth pointing out, of course, that the report does talk about other factors, of course, quality of life in the UK, things to do with eating and sort of exercise, etc. But it is not good news. I mean, there's some bits of it which just highlights the fact that the UK is very good at approving medicine quickly, but it's all put more pressure on Rishi Sunak ahead of the release of the NHS workforce plan on Thursday, and also, crucially, ahead of that 75th anniversary of the NHS next month.
So are we having different policy statements every day this week on the NHS? Those are going to be one big day with one big announcement.
It's going to be brought on Thursday. That's when it's all scheduled to be. But I imagine we'll see drip-fed stories throughout the next few days. Already we've seen Rishi Sunak reportedly considering plans to introduce medical schools in those areas which are really suffering from care, a lack of care. That 1 in 10 vacancies in the NHS workforce at the present, but of course that doesn't fall evenly across the country. So there are some areas which are suffering from a lack of force more than others.
But James, how is he going to recruit, say, doctors? It's 3 years to train a nurse, 5-7 years to train a doctor. With the junior doctor strike that continues, that goes on and on, how could you then attract young people to say, this is a good career, this would be a good career choice for you?
Yeah, he's going to completely struggle to do that, particularly at this side of an election, because, as you say, Eamonn, there's longer-term issues facing it. So they're considering a range of different ways in which you can kind of, you can't look at, for instance, salary, because there isn't much money available in the system. So trying to look at ways to ease the burden, looking at things like bringing in new technology, etc. But you're right, it's going to be a real problem for Rishi Sunak to see any major sort of sign of this ahead of the next election. They want to do things like having sort of pharmacies considering ways to give out care, etc., in order to put the burden within the system on other bits of it. But it's going to be a real problem, and that's why we're going to see Labour leading on the attack on this.
I mean, we are hearing, as part of this 15-year workforce plan from Rishi Sunak, that he's going to talk about doctors' apprenticeships, so people leave school and essentially learn to be a doctor on the job, on a hospital floor. What do you make of that? Do you think that could be the way forward?
I mean, there's certainly strong potential to look at what other countries are doing, and I hope that the benefit of this report, which obviously does consider 19 different systems, as we do look at other countries who do similar things in this. But I think it's obviously going to be very difficult, given people's concerns about the lack of care, etc., whether these are going to be fully qualified to do this.
But there's got to be a different way of doing things and looking at things and revamping the system. I mean, I think there should be apprenticeships for dentists, there should be apprenticeships for nurses, there should be apprenticeships for doctors. It's not to say that there should be any less well trained at all of this. We should just make it easier for people to be these professionals. I mean, when I was young, if I had been smart enough, I would have been a doctor.
Would you?
Yeah.
Are you good with gore?
No, but I'm nice in a white coat and a stethoscope, sort of looks the part, But you're not allowed to wear those nowadays. But I don't know, I would have aspired to being a doctor, but I know I couldn't have done it. And that's why I stand back and scratch my head and go, why aren't these people lauded? Why aren't they praised? Why aren't they valued within our society?
I think you're quite right, and I think it's really telling that ahead of next month's 75th anniversary of the NHS, it's much more low-key, the celebration around it, compared to 5 years ago. And I think that's because people know that this quality has worsened, and that for all the kind of praise within the COVID crisis, frankly, the cost of living pressures on doctors has got a lot worse, and that's why we're seeing people go abroad, and there's high numbers of vacancies within the NHS system.
I mean, a lot of it as well is to do with the waiting list, isn't it? I mean, 7.8 million people are waiting for care in the NHS in England. I mean, the government would say a lot of that is down to COVID, and it's a COVID backlog. How much do you think that's true, or do you think it's to do with the funding model, and quite frankly, it's not working?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's always worth instructive now is because of devolution, we've now got an NHS in England, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, all with different governments in control of that. And over the weekend, I was reading some of the Scottish press, which shows that in Scotland it's even worse than England. So I don't think it's necessarily to do with the party in control, but it is going to be about the system which is underpinning all of this. And one would hope that often this debate comes down to, are we going to have Britain or America? Well, actually, there's a whole variety of different systems. As you can see from this report out today, other sister countries in Europe, for instance, are doing things differently. So are there ways which you can learn from it? The key thing is I don't think anything's going to be done this time of an election. West Streeting on Labour's side has been talking a very good game about this, but I wonder if actually he's going to be able to take on the unions with his own party and deliver something that works for consumers and patients.
James, so much to talk to you about today. We're going to have you back later in the show, but the Putin situation and the Wagner coup, does that wet your lips in any way?
Yeah, I think it was really telling is how keen our government is to stay out of the whole thing in the sense of this is a Russian internal matter. We're not going to get involved picking one side or the other. I do think what's really telling is that unlike last February, when there was the invasion that happened, the UK and the USA declassified all the intelligence to stop Putin getting a pretext of lies. They didn't do that this time. They knew as soon as like last Wednesday that there was going to be some kind of coup, mutiny, etc., and they didn't declassify that, and that was really telling, I think.
OK. Back after 7. Let's talk some more. Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. That's James Heal. James, the political correspondent for The Spectator.
Now, yesterday was the joint hottest day of the year so far, with a hosepipe ban coming into force in Sussex and Kent from today.
Now, it comes as homeowners call for tougher punishments for failing water firms. After South East Water, customers say they faced months of poor water supply. Well, our South East of England reporter Ray Addison has the story.
You could be forgiven for thinking Britain has enough water. An island nation, we're literally surrounded by the stuff. And there's plenty of rain. Over the last 12 months, the South East has seen 32 inches alone. And yet apparently that's still not enough. South East Water has now introduced a hosepipe ban across Sussex and Kent. The company's chief executive seemingly blaming the public for using too much water. Nusrat Ghani is the local MP.
That's just absolutely absurd. We've had a couple of days of sunshine, so people are obviously, I don't know, taking an extra shower. Who knows? It isn't remarkable. We do get a few days of glorious sunshine every year. Reservoirs are okay. This was South East Water's lack of forward planning to treat water to ensure it was in the system so people could have it if we had a couple of hot days.
From today, anyone caught using a hosepipe to water their garden, clean their car or fill their swimming pool could be slapped with a £1,000 fine. It's a decision that's received a mixed reaction from people here in Sussex.
The thought that this is our fault and we're all sitting around filling up our swimming pools, this is absolute nonsense. This is them trying to manipulate the story.
It will affect my life because I grow a lot of vegetables. I've got a garden. And so it'll be difficult to keep it watered.
Well, it is an emergency situation, I suppose, isn't it? So, I think people haven't got water to drink and wash with. So I think priority shouldn't be to go and water the garden or fill your swimming pool up.
Thank you. We'll pop it in the boot for you.
The ban follows a tough month for residents in Kent and Sussex, with many experiencing days of low water flow or none at all. It forced South East Water to set up bottle stations, handing out rations to desperate residents, many of whom blame the firm for their thirst.
The reservoirs, from what I understand, are all full. And if they can't get it out to us, it's a poor show, I think. I would expect the South East Water to actually produce enough water for us all and mend the reservoirs and mend the pipes.
Gareth Owen Williams is a local Liberal Democrat councillor. He believes South East Water has failed to prepare for the growth in population.
They haven't built enough resilience in the system, and then the first hot week in June, suddenly, people are using too much water. They didn't see that coming. And we are, at Wealdon, we are the local authority, we are being forced to approve enough houses to please the government. They are supposed to be ready for this. So, where is their spare capacity? Where are their resources?
Whoever or whatever is to blame for the water shortage, people across Kent and Sussex now have to think twice before turning on the tap. Ray Addison, GB News.
What a lot of nonsense. These water companies are a total and utter disgrace. They basically want to have the title that they run the water network, but they don't want to pay any money. They can talk about what they're supposed to do, the minimum stuff they're supposed to do. What do they not do, Ellie? They don't dig holes in the ground.
Yep.
So tell us, when was the last one?
So we just Googled this. Last reservoir to be built in the UK was 1991, 32 years ago.
Somewhere called Carsington, wherever Carsington is. And that's the last time they dug a hole in the ground. So basically, I mean, you just have to ask yourself, how do they get water in Iran? How do they get water in Afghanistan? How do they get water in Portugal, in Spain? How do they have golf courses and swimming pools filled up to the brim and whatever? And where's the innovation, desalination? What is all this water in the sea? They talk about the sea rising. Well, why aren't we taking a lot of that and desalinating it, taking the salt out of it? Where's the invention? You just can't keep building more houses, more factories, bigger towns and cities, and not building more reservoirs. So, you know, water companies, I just don't get it with them. And what they do is, of course, they drain all our rivers, all our beautiful rivers. They drain them with the nice rivers. They take it from the top of the river as opposed to the bottom of the river. So it stops the water coming down the river and, you know, feeding animals and wildlife and plants and all that sort of thing. So they do that wrong. They pillage rivers. They don't store water of their own. Really charlatans, absolute charlatans.
And we've got the issue with raw sewage as well at the moment.
Raw sewage,
being pumped into to our seas.
Yeah. So they took over this responsibility from the government. The government was so keen to give it to them whenever they privatised all this. They said, yes, please have it, you'll do it, great, there's a licence for you, there's a licence for you. But no one is prepared to invest it. And I don't care what anyone says. You can't give responsibility for services like train services or the water service or whatever to what are those companies called? Hedge funds, you know, who are looking profit all the time. It's either a service or a business. Can you have somewhere in between? Just putting it out there, gbviews at gbnews.com. But I mean, I suppose you could say you don't believe that whatever you're doing is running the well dry, do you? You don't think that what you're doing at home is causing drought throughout the country?
No, of course not. I mean, South East Water have said that because people are working from home, that's the reason why the reservoirs are running dry, because people are having maybe a midday shower or a midday putting on a wash.
Or drinking a lot of water.
Or drinking a lot of water, which you have to do in the heat, don't you?
What else are they doing that's taking... But they would have to do that if they went into the office.
Into the office. Well, they might not be having a shower if they went into the office. But that's their explanation. But really, I think the population has grown an awful lot.
You shouldn't be drinking that and probably affecting the whole water table there. Yeah, OK. Carlos Alcaraz, have you heard of him?
No, not until today.
Well, you will, because Wimbledon is nearly here, and he is the favourite for Wimbledon following victory at Queen's Club yesterday. All the sport, including the tennis, Paul Coyte, next.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Welcome back. It is 6:30 on the nose. Still lots to come on today's programme.
6:45, goodbye Yellow Brick Road. Live from Glastonbury after Elton John bid farewell to fans. His last ever live performance. Can't believe that. I mean, like, he's not going to do anything live again.
I love Elton John. Have you ever seen him live?
Yes, I have, yeah.
No, I never have. It's on my list. And at 7:20, as
he's not on your list because he's not doing it anymore.
He's not doing it anymore. I've missed my list. Now, as new data reveals, insolvencies among under 25s increased substantially last year. We'll ask if young people are the biggest victims in the cost of living crisis, or if they just need to step up and work harder.
Well, especially if you're under 25, let us know. Get in touch by emailing gbviews@gbnews.com, or you can tweet at gbnews. On this Monday morning, they stack up like this. The Express, first of all, let's have it. As Arteta claims Arsenal need to splash cash, eyeing up rumoured signing Kai Havertz from Chelsea. The Mail calls tennis star Carlos Alcaraz the King of Queens as the Spaniard returns to the world #1 spot. Finally, Australia take the Ashes control. In The Guardian, England's women set for a test match defeat there. Let's get into some of those stories. Paul Coit with us this morning. Where do you want to begin, Paul?
I want to begin with the fact that it's not over for Ellie and Elton John. Still got 3 gigs left.
Has he?
Stockholm is going to be the last.
So I need
the
to
last
fly.
one in this country was Glastonbury. He's still playing in Stockholm. So if you get to Stockholm, you're still okay.
But tickets are about $3,000.
That's it.
That's it. Okay.
Okay.
I'll
But,
think
you
about
know,
that one.
Yeah,
Thanks,
think about
Rosie.
it, you know.
You're in the know, very
well,
good.
just to let you know.
Thank you.
It'll be like that until the comeback tour.
Yeah, exactly. When you reckon that's going to
Please,
be?
I hope so.
Elton's 90th birthday comeback tour.
He's still quite young, though. 74?
Well, up there,
I think
yeah.
that's young.
He's up there. I think he's a little older than that, I think, Elton. Anyway, tennis. Should we start with tennis?
Yeah.
Carlos Alcaraz?
Yeah.
This is the guy. I mean, I think I said this time last year. He's 20.
Yeah.
So at 19, he was the youngest world... it was youngest world #1. So he goes into Wimbledon as the #1 seed after beating Alex de Minaur at Queen's Club yesterday, who was the guy, by the way, that beat Andy Murray from Australia. So that kind of makes Andy feel a little bit better. So Wimbledon starts next week, and he's going to be the guy. I think it's going to be Carlos Alcaraz, in my opinion.
So this is like an Emma Raducanu all over again. It's just this young, incredible talent.
Well, the funny thing is, you say it's a bit like Emma Raducanu. He won the US Open as well earlier on this year at 19. So you're on the money, but... he is the real deal. Everybody's been saying this for a long time. He's very young, Spanish, but he really is a fantastic tennis player. And I think Djokovic against him, I know it's early to call, in the Wimbledon final. Got a very big feeling about that one.
Mate, I haven't a clue what you're talking about because... what else you're going to talk about because no one's given me a list.
Shall I tell you?
Oh, yeah, you... So
Shall I just go into it?
led by you.
It's the Women's Ashes. Women's Ashes is on. Day 5.
Not good.
Well... It's kind of on a knife edge. It started off OK, then we ended up with a bit of trouble, so it's a bad afternoon. So England needed 268 to win. Then there was a fall of a load of wickets, 73 for 4. Finished the day on 116 for 5, and basically England will need 150. I'm throwing all these numbers all over the place. 152 runs to win. They need 152 runs to win. They've got 5 wickets to get through, and it's on a knife edge. I mean, you'd say Australia are the favourites here, but after what happened last week with the men's Ashes, we'd be very hopeful that the women can do something with this. But it's not going to be easy. 116 for 5, so 152 runs to win for England against Australia.
OK, and the football transfer window, what have we got going on?
Quick word, Nicholas Jackson, £30 million move from Chelsea to Villarreal, they're talking about, from Senegal. Kai Havertz, to Arsenal. Now, this is Chelsea. The list that goes on, they've got Kanté, Ziyech, Koulibaly, Mendy, Neves from Wolves, all going to Saudi Arabia. The latest expected to go now to Saudi Arabia, and the main point about this is it's another young player, and that's Damari Gray, so 26 years old from Everton. They've got to make a decision in their career, haven't they, and think, well, what do I do? Do I stick around here? Do I stay with the Premier League, see how things go, or when the big money comes calling, Saudi Arabia, do I just go for it? And it seems there's a lot that are.
Yeah, and it's the big money's calling very early in their careers for a lot of them. Yeah.
So, you know, it just makes me wonder how big this is actually going to be in Saudi Arabia. And the other thing, and I mentioned that earlier, is now, and it was actually a joke I made about 3 weeks ago, thinking when are Saudi Arabia going to come in for the tennis? Well, they now have. They now have. So they're now having meetings after the Live Golf thing, and then there's been that merger with PGA Golf, of course, Newcastle. There's been boxing over in Saudi Arabia. So now they have come in for tennis. Now, there was all the talk about sports washing. This is like a couple of years ago. Roger Federer was asked to play over in Saudi Arabia and refused because he said, no, I will not do it. I'll make a stand. Whereas now the ATP look like they're getting into bed with the investment group again. So they're saying that this partnership will include events and technology and infrastructure, which just sound like a load of words, but I think it just means a lot of money is now being offered to the ATP, and now they're extremely interested.
Sport is notoriously greedy, of course.
Of course, and they're just taking over whatever they can.
They'll go where the money is.
Yeah, they will.
No matter what the sport is.
Tennis will be involved next as well.
I still would like to know who's putting up the money for Man United, because that's gone all quiet, hasn't it?
Blimey, we're looking a year and a bit. But like I said, I've got a funny feeling that they're just stringing them along, just keeping the fans off their back, the Glazers, and then let's just see what happens. So already 6 bids. Now, Zarnell Hughes, I want to mention Zarnell Hughes. Ran the fastest 100 metres by any Brit since Linford Christie back in 1993.
9.83 seconds.
9.83. There was the old 9.9 club back in the day. Any sprinter that could actually get inside that. Now, see that on there.
Which is?
Now, that is his prediction. Now, he had a dream the night before, and it says on the top, Saturday, the 24th of June, competition day in New York, I'm going to run, and what's the number? 9.83. How about that?
Have you any spooky dreams,
had a
any
vision.
premonitions?
I have spooky dreams all the time. I feel like I'm a little bit...
Oh, are
witchy.
you?
Yeah,
Are you a bit witchy?
Maybe. I've got something in me. I can feel it in my waters. Not to that extreme.
Well, it didn't happen for Ascot for Saturday, did it? Unfortunately. When Ellie texts me and says, oh, Coity, have you got any tips? And I'm saying, well, I'm at the baseball, so I haven't got anything. So I said, oh, can you put a tenner on for me? Oh, yeah, I've put a tenner on, it's each way, so that'll be 20 quid and the horse came nowhere. Let me know where the dream comes from.
I don't even know. Sorry about that, Coity. Sorry. So I didn't have the witchiness then. But...
Unfortunately, no. Unfortunately, no.
Sorry about that.
And finally, one more, and the baseball, by the way, at the London Stadium yesterday.
Tell us about this baseball.
It was terrific. It was...
You had a lovely time.
I had a lovely time. Major League Baseball, and they're trying to do it every year, and because they want to spread baseball around the world. So it was last done 4 years ago, and it was the Boston Red Sox against the New York Yankees. Then we had the problem with COVID, so then it didn't come back until this weekend. Chicago Cubs against their rivals, the St. Louis Cardinals. So they played on Saturday, played on Sunday, ended up winning 1 game apiece. You know what? Eamonn, this is going to haunt me forever. I was standing next to Bill Murray, as close as you are now, the actor Bill Murray. Yeah. Huge Chicago Cubs fan.
He's got a very young girlfriend.
Yeah, Khalees, the singer. Yeah. And anyway, I'm thinking, do I go for the selfie? And I'm thinking, I'm not going to do it. So then a couple of minutes later...
Don't tell me he asked you.
Well... Khalees did, and I'm like, OK, what about the old man? Can I have a picture with him? But I just didn't go for it. But I did meet a lot of legends. Now, there's a legend in Chicago. If you mention the name Ryne Sandberg, everybody would know who he is. One of great Chicago Cubs, member of the Hall of Fame, and also won the World Series as well. Well, I say won the World Series. He was part of the club later in 2016. Now, this is Ryne. Now, just have a look at what he's got on his finger there. Now, that is
a big ring.
That is one piece of bling, isn't it, Ryne? I don't know what's shinier. Is it his teeth or is it the rings? But there's Ryne. Ryne's a lovely guy and a real hero. But look at that ring. And I said, well, look, can I try the ring on? He wasn't happy with me trying the ring on. And I also said, look, Are you serious with that? Say someone's going to take it off, and he's going, listen, at baseball, it never happens. People respect the ring. So there we are. And that is the ring, the World Series ring.
That could change your image.
I think
a big ring.
I'm not being funny. I think I'd look great in that.
Yes.
It would suit you, Chris.
We'd all be expected to kiss your ring, wouldn't we? The way it would be.
Careful. Yeah.
All the best, my friend.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Now, stay with us. We're going to
Do you have a big
discussing...
ring?
I wish. No, I've got that one. It's not quite the same. Not quite the same. We're going to be discussing the Duchess of York's breast cancer diagnosis as she tells other women to check themselves. We'll be going through the papers with Chris Akabusi and Dawn Neeson. That's next.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
18 minutes now before 7 o'clock. A very good morning to you, wherever you are. You're very welcome on board. It's Eamonn and Ellie. Breakfast on GB News.
Let's bring you up to date with today's front pages. And the Times goes with the fall of Putin as Britain is told to prepare for the collapse of the Russian government.
Treasons to be cheerful, says the Metro, as Ukrainians take advantage of the Wagner Group insurrection.
The Sun go with Sarah Ferguson's breast cancer diagnosis, with the Duchess of York now recovering at home.
And the Telegraph focuses on Prince William. I think this is really, really good and interesting, and we wish him well with this. He has pledged to make ending homelessness his life's work.
And some like it hot, say the Star. With 5 heat waves on the way, 5, the RSPCA warns that people's pet snakes could make an escape this summer. I hope not.
So why does the heat mean that they escape?
All the adders come out.
Because they like the hot weather.
Yeah, they like to bask in the sun.
They like the hot weather. And it makes them frisky as well.
Does it?
Yeah.
Oh, we don't want that.
It's not just me then. That's good. Hello, Chris Akabusi, Dawn Neeson, going through the newspapers. And listen, this whole situation in Russia with the attempted coup by the Wagner Group. Dawn, you're taking it front page from the Times. Your interpretation.
Yeah, no, I was lucky enough to be covering this story as it's breaking live on Saturday, and it's happening so fast, isn't it, Eamonn? It's incredible. You know, it's sort of like it happened on Friday night, Saturday morning, and now suddenly we're waking up and it's prepare for fall of Putin in Britain is told as a headline on the Times. I'm not quite understanding why that's going to happen, because from what we understand, Prigozhin has been exiled to Belarus, so he's no longer a threat to Moscow or to Putin. And the 25,000-strong force that Prigozhin took with him to get to the town they were in, which was 1.1 million people, so it feels like it's sort of fizzled out. So I'm not entirely sure what this story is about in the Times. And they're saying, you know, the coup attempt could trigger a regime train. And we've got to remember Russia is a nuclear power, but it doesn't seem to be happening because Prigozhin is no longer there. Putin seems to be pretty much in control still. Yeah. So I'm not quite sure what's happening. But the one thing that, you know, the other front page where saying sort of like, you know, treasons to be cheerful, we've got to bear in mind that the Wagner Group aren't sort of cuddly liberals, by the way. I mean, they are literally fascists. So I'm not entirely sure, you know, if they had have taken over and overseen the throw of Putin, it would have been good news for anyone.
As you say, fascinating. I find it amazing that Russia, being maybe at worst the third biggest military power in the world, that they have to hire in a guy with his own private army to do their dirty work for them. I just think it's amazing, Chris, that organisations like this exist around the world, these guns for hire, not 10 of them, 20 of them, but 25,000 of them, really well armed and really well equipped.
Yeah, which was, I think, it's sort of equivalent to a brigade in the UK. But what you have got, these are guys who either are mercenaries or special forces that want to continue, or malcontents, criminals. And I do get that. The French Foreign Legion, you know, was something when I was a young lad. I don't know if it's still around now, but people used to go to Foreign Legion for the same thing. Yeah. Look, I definitely understand. Well, I definitely understand. No, whoa. I don't understand. My take here was in the Metro where it says treason to be careful, to be cheerful. And what they're really saying is that there has been a swing change now, potentially, in the war there in Europe, where they're saying, for example, the Wagner Group, who took out 39 aircrew and pilots, which is the biggest loss the Russians had. So, the friendly fire is the biggest loss that the Russians have actually had. And it exposed the Russians' defence forces in Ukraine as the crew left Ukraine to head towards Moscow.
That left openings.
Exactly. But there in Ukraine. And it shows also the chaos, split and indecisiveness within the Russians' ranks. Now, it's probably a little bit early to say Putin's going to go anywhere because he's still got a grip on the place. Yeah. But it does show, is it the beginning of the end or end of the beginning? One of those sort of phrases.
Well, we'll find out. Dawn, the Sun front page, they're going with the Sarah Ferguson story.
Yes.
So she had a mammogram and that resulted in them detecting cancer. We're told that she's had a single mastectomy.
Yeah, this is a story on a lot of the front pages today. News broke over the weekend that Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York, she's 63 years old, she was found to have breast cancer in a routine mammogram. And I think that's the important part about this story is, you know, go and get yourself checked. It's not painful, it's not even that uncomfortable, but it's so important because if we do catch breast cancer early, you've got a 98% chance of survival. So it's so important that this is a friend of Sarah Ferguson who's talking out. It's not an interview with Sarah herself. But, you know, she was in hospital for 6 days. She had a single mastectomy. Whether she will need radiotherapy after, we don't know that detail yet, but she is now resting at home. In the home she still shares with Andrew, which I find a bit weird. But, and, you know, the interesting thing about this story is that she lost her dad as well, Ronald Ferguson, to prostate cancer. And there is a link, a genetic link between breast cancer and prostate cancer if it runs in the family. So again, you know, for Sarah's two daughters, it's very important. We know there is a hereditary link with breast cancer.
Well, we wish her well.
Absolutely, but get checked. Please get yourself checked.
Yeah, and as you say, Dawn, I think if anything, it just highlights the importance, doesn't it?
Exactly.
Going to your routine mammograms, and thank God she's at home and appears to be recovering well.
Yeah.
As you say, wish her well.
Another royal story, front page of the Daily Telegraph. We've got Prince William, the Prince of Wales, and I think what he's aiming towards, helping the homeless, not just helping the homeless, Chris, but eradicating homelessness. He now says this is his life's work.
Yes, exactly. And his mantra, everyone has a safe and secure home, is what he's looking for. It will be his life work. And he was first introduced to the homeless crisis by his mum, Princess Di, and when he was 11 years of age. And inside of the Telegraph, they've got some a great picture. I don't know if anyone you can see that there, but it's got some specific dates where the Prince was involved in 1993, his earliest experience to homelessness. And, you know, he's using his ability to draw people together to make a real concerted effort over the next 5 years to have a leading programme that can be replicated throughout the country. So he's picked 6 cities, or 6 areas, should I say, and local authorities, developers, landowners, social services, housing associations come together and to really have this great big blueprint, because apparently in Finland they've done this and it's eradicated homelessness in Finland, and so he's really keen.
Seriously? I mean, they could go to Finland and say, it's eradicated, we don't have it here.
Well, that's what the paper said. That in Finland, so he's copying the blueprint there. He's been involved in the last 2 years. It's not something like he's sort of let other people get on with. He's been really involved with making this happen, and he really wants... He felt that there was a paucity. His mum got involved in 1993, or got him involved in 1993, and it's not moved on fast enough for him. And so,
we wish him well. We wish him well, Chris, with that.
Yeah, and what a legacy, wouldn't it be?
Indeed.
It's just amazing. Dawn, Chris, we've got to leave it there, I'm afraid. You're back with us in the next hour, aren't you? Brilliant.
Yes.
Now, Elton John closed Glastonbury 2023 last night in his final UK show ever before retirement.
Showbiz reporter Stephanie Tecci was there to witness it and joins us live from Glastonbury. It looks very quiet there, Stephanie. Have they all moved out, or do they all lie on today with hangovers? And when does the place empty?
Okay, well, you know what? I think it's actually going to be emptying over the next week. There have been stories of campers who refuse to leave Glastonbury. There was one story I heard of one woman who stayed practically the whole summer. But today is the mass exodus from Worthy Farm after such a thrilling performance from Sir Elton John last night. This morning there are a couple of campmates who have woken up with definitely a sore head.
Stephanie, your headband is very Elton John. I think he'd be very, very proud of your outfit today. But you were there, you watched him, his final UK show. What did you make of it? What's your review?
To be honest, I don't think Elton John's ready to bow out just yet. From what I saw, was a man who's still very much at the top of his game. For the past 25 years, Elton John has been talking about retiring, and he had stuff such as the pandemic, which put this tour off. He had hip surgery, but yesterday he was very much a man in charge. He put the show into show business last night. I have to admit, we've had a few lackluster headliners over the weekend with the Guns N' Roses, Arctic Monkeys, but Elton John showed how it was done last night. He went through a catalogue of all of his music. He's had 30 albums, so you can imagine he wasn't short of performance hits yesterday that he performed. The only thing that was quite funny was his trousers kept on falling down, which he made quite a joke about, but he was the ultimate showman. It was always going to be an emotional performance for Elton. He said he never thought he would play Glastonbury, let alone play it as his final ever UK tour. So it was quite an emotional fan for both him and fans, but fans did their best yesterday. They were dressed up to the nines with the trademark glasses and all the glitz and the glamour as well.
Yeah. And what was his final song on his final UK live show?
It was Rocket Man. He done like an extended version of Rocket Man, and you could not fault him at all. It's just seeing him being able to sing so powerfully and also play the piano at the same time. It's something I'm going to treasure for the rest of my life. And I really do hope that one day he can get back on tour, because I just feel like he is not done yet, and he's still got an amazing, powerful voice.
How old is he?
I think 74. Stephanie, you might know. I'm putting you on the spot now.
I think he's 73, going to be 74 this year.
I'm ageing him before his time. But Stephanie, how incredible for you to be there at the last performance. I mean, like you say, it's something that you'll remember for the rest of your life. I've got to ask you about Lewis Capaldi over the weekend, because I saw some clips. It was a really, really emotional moment, wasn't it? He was actually struggling to sing.
Yeah, it was one of the poignant moments of the weekend. Lewis Capaldi, in the lead up to Glastonbury, he took 3 weeks off because he wanted to recover. He suffers from Tourette's, so can you imagine, as a singer, it's quite hard to perform when you have such a neurological condition such as Tourette's. And he was forced to stop singing halfway through his performance as he couldn't continue. But his fans love him, and they just all continued finishing the song for him. He has said that he will be taking a break from music, which is quite sad. And, you know, he's very young at the beginning of his career. So for this to happen, it's really going to affect his touring ability. And to see it on a big stage such as Glastonbury, it's quite heartbreaking to watch.
Gosh, but brilliant that the fans were there and they helped him out in that way. Lovely to see. Is it really quiet? Could you not raise your voice there or anything? It looks so serene.
It looks peaceful.
Well, I get a lot of campers in the morning saying, "Are you on GB News?" Like, you like being my wake-up call on camp. So I try to keep my voice down, but I think there's so many people who actually want to get on air, so I need to be careful.
And as I understand it, when they all leave, a lot of them just leave their tents behind.
Well, we actually made a worthy pledge. When you get a Glastonbury ticket, you're actually signing up to say that you will take your rubbish with you. You cannot leave your tents behind. And I think one thing about Glastonbury, in comparison to all the other festivals, there's such a big, care and love for Worthy Farm, because they do open up this ground to us once a year, and you have about up to 200,000 people. So every little helps, and they always say, take your tent home.
Take your tent home. That's the advice. Stephanie, thank you. Look forward to speaking to you again. We'll see more aspects of people packing up and what went on and whatever. For the moment, thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Eamonn and Ellie.
Thank you. It looks lovely there, doesn't it? So peaceful. Do stay with us, though, because coming up, we'll have more on the future of Vladimir Putin as the United States warns of cracks forming in the Russian leadership.
But first, your Monday forecast.
Hello there. Very good morning to you. I'm Jonathan Vautry, here with your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. A fresher feel to the new working week compared to the weekend for many of us, all thanks to westerly winds that are pushing in from the Atlantic, helping to spread much cooler conditions across the UK. Monday is also starting off on a bright note for many of us. There's a decent amount of sunshine first thing, but already starting to see some showers push their way in from the west, and we'll see further showers bubbling up into the afternoon. Some of those, particularly across the northern half of the UK, could be heavy at times, maybe with an isolated rumble of thunder as well. But for Wales, central southern areas of England, likely staying dry throughout the day with a decent amount of sunshine. For all of us, though, those temperatures will be down compared to the weekend and feeling fresher. Generally, highs around 17, 19 degrees further to the north and west, 22, 25 in the south and east. Those showers will ease their way off as we head into this evening, allowing for some late evening sunshine, though the sunshine could be hazy at times as this wispy cloud pushes in, and that's ahead of this band of rain that's going to start to arrive into Northern Ireland throughout the early hours of Tuesday morning. So turning quite damp towards dawn, temperatures falling down to around 12, 14 degrees Celsius, but the humidity is going to start building again as this cloud and rain pushes its way in from the west. Some of the heavier bursts likely for northwest Scotland, northwest England and northwest Wales. It will turn patchier as it heads towards the east, and actually the far south of England towards the southeast could stay largely dry throughout the day, but generally cloudier compared to the weekend. Temperatures, again, largely around the high teens, up in the northwest to the low 20s further towards the south and east, but feeling that bit more humid and also quite breezy, particularly in the west as that rain moves in. Further unsettled conditions are likely as we head throughout the rest of the week, so further rain at times. Temperatures, again, holding up around the high teens or low 20s. Bye-bye.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. But
And action.
Sergeant, the big green, my superstar panel, they're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News. Britain's watching.
Britain is told to prepare for the fall of Putin as America's top diplomat warns of cracks in the Russian regime.
Hello there, very good to see you. Eamonn and Ellie today here on Breakfast on GB News. The time just after 7 o'clock, Monday the 26th of June.
Yeah, really good to have you with us this morning. Here's what's leading the news. Britain must prepare for the sudden collapse of the Russian leadership. That's according to government assessments following an attempted coup. It comes as the US Secretary of State warns that the insurrection shows cracks in Putin's power.
People are more likely to die from treatable conditions in Britain than in other rich countries, according to a major new study which links the problem to a lack of NHS resources. We're going to be talking to the Minister for Social Care in a few minutes' time.
The Duchess of York has undergone treatment for breast cancer after it was caught early during a routine mammogram. Sarah Ferguson returned to Windsor this weekend, where she's recovering with family.
The Prince of Wales will unveil a plan to eradicate homelessness with a pledge to make it his life's work to ensure everyone has a safe and secure home.
And bowing out in style, Elton John closes Glastonbury 2023 with an unforgettable performance before hanging up his microphone as he prepares to retire.
And after the jaunt hottest day of the year so far, we'll have the latest weather update as conditions begin to turn for a bit.
After a hot and humid weekend, Monday offers many of us something a little bit fresher. Join me later for the full weather forecast.
To our top story now, an internal government assessments have warned that the UK should prepare for the sudden collapse of the Putin regime. That's following an attempted coup by Wagner Group mercenaries.
Now, yesterday, the American Secretary of State Anthony Blinken said the insurrection showed that cracks are beginning in Vladimir Putin's power and warned that this is not the end of the story.
Well, earlier defence editor of the Evening Standard, Robert Fox, told us that Putin is not Mr. Popular.
And the Americans began to suspect something was up in the aftermath of the bridge being blown by the British missiles, Storm Shadow, And at the same time, you may remember that Prigozhin started making his moves. He started accusing the hierarchy in Moscow of running a war in Ukraine to stuff the pockets of the oligarchs from what they could seize from Kiev. We knew trouble was on its way. And as you were rightly saying, following Antony Blinken, it looks as if the trouble isn't over.
And what do you mean? What do you mean by that? It looks as though Putin suppressed the trouble. He's either bought this guy off, this guy who leads the Wagner group. What do you think the deal has been? What was the deal that has been done? What do you think it was?
Well, nobody really knows, because there have been two very dubious sources who have said that he was paid a bit of money, that part of the Wagner would disintegrate, would dissolve, and part of them would join the Russian armed forces. He would go to Belarus. It's only Dmitry Peskov, not very well known for 100% accurate truth-telling, the spokesman for Putin, and Mr. Lukashenko, the president of Belarus, who's been a very dodgy figure in the past and has a lot of bubbling protest in his own country for his last, as they see it, stolen election. Why I think everybody, from what we can see, is so concerned is look at the body language or the non-body language of Mr. Putin. Of the principal players, it's a huge game of now you see me, now you don't. Once Rostov-on-Don and Voronezh were taken over very peacefully, if it really was a takeover, does that look like a takeover that you're looking at in the picture of Prigozhin there? It was absolutely clear that he was panicked, Putin. He goes on telly, he says, stab in the back, this is just like 1917, it's what's happened over again in Russian history, I'm going to these people are traitors. This is absolute treason. We will crack down hard. And then we have to wait several hours to hear that a convoy is turned back on the road of Moscow. Money has been paid. But perhaps the most significant images were the Wagner group leaving Rostov-on-Don with flowers in the barrels of the tanks and crowds cheering them.
It was...
Putin, visibly, almost for the first time, is quite clearly, to the Russian television viewing public, is not Mr. Popular.
Well, that's what's going on in Russia. What's going on here? James Heal, political correspondent at The Spectator. British response to this one, James?
Yeah, well, so there's a briefing in the Times today about the government's response, and they said they've done assessments that, Putin, this could be the end of Putin. I think, obviously, those are sort of preparing for all variety of scenarios, worst-case scenario, etc. But I certainly think it's true to say that the Ukrainians and the British as well will be heartened by the fact that you need unity of command in all of this in a war situation, and the Russians clearly lack that, whereas the Ukrainians will be strengthened by this. Now, tonight, Ben Wallace will be giving a big speech at the Rusi Think Tank Institute, and hopefully I think we'll be seeing some kind more about what the British government's official response will be to Ukraine, coming off the back of his surprise rejection from NATO.
It's really interesting, isn't it, the UK government's stance on this so far? They haven't really wanted to get involved. They've kind of said this is an internal Russian matter.
Well, I think that's because you look at both, and it's not a case of who's the best option, it's who's the case of the least worst. And Prigozhin, obviously, was a mercenary warlord with these rapacious warriors across Africa and Europe as well. So I think he was not seen as particularly, sort of reliable person to do business with, etc. The fact is that Russia is the largest nuclear power in the world, and I think the concern is that, Putin, if he fell, was at least a degree of stability there, and they don't want these sort of nukes and other weapons, etc., falling into the hands of the wrong people.
Yeah, goodness me, James. There's so many consequences to what has gone on here. We don't know if this is the end of the Wagner Group, if Putin has been able to stifle this, what's his future going to be. But meanwhile, you mentioned Ben Wallace there, and there's lots of talk about him trying to get a position within NATO, for instance. What about NATO's role after all this? Ukraine's involvement with NATO, Ben Wallace, any British future connection with NATO? How do you read that?
I think this whole war has really emphasise the importance of NATO. And you've seen Sweden and Finland apply to join. The bloc is now 31 strong. And I think really we're going to see the end of the peace dividend that we saw with the Cold War collapse in 1991. And basically all countries are going to have to spend more on defence. This has made them much more aware of it. And of course, you've got the sort of spectre of China looking over all of this, because people are concerned that what's happening now with Ukraine and Russia could have ramifications in China and Taiwan. Obviously, there's a vacancy for NATO General Secretary at the moment. There's 31 nations. They all need to agree on who it's going to be. Ben Wallace was seen as the favourite by a lot of people. He's now been ruled out, but there's question marks over all the likely people who could serve this role. There's been sort of Kallis of Estonia has been suggested, Freeman of Denmark has been suggested, and Ursula von der Leyen of Germany. But take the last one, for instance. She was German Defence Minister when the Germans had to do one infamous exercise where they were practising with brooms rather than machine guns because of the defence cuts there. And I think this is the issue, really, is that Europe has not been prepared for this kind of conflict before for a long, long time.
Europe has not been prepared for the Wagner Group.
No.
I mean, this amazes me that this private army exists so well equipped, so well manned, 25,000 soldiers marching on the Russian capital, Moscow, and providing a real scare to Vladimir Putin.
Yes, quite. And I think that it shows the sort of strengths and weaknesses of Putin's system, which is that he likes competing factions because you want to be able to sort of have everyone spying on each other, different kind of competing power blocks. But of course it means that, are you going to get any kind of order out of that? And what happens if the groups turn on you? And I think we've really seen, everyone can agree on this, Putin is weakened as a result of the weekend's events.
And briefly, James, what next for Putin? Where is he now? We haven't seen him, have we, since?
No, there's very little of him. I think we saw that address on Saturday, and some people suggest sort of Machiavellian style that he orchestrated the whole thing. I think if you look at the body language of what he was doing on Saturday, he shows he's quite concerned. So I expect to be watching and waiting and planning his next move and potentially taking out on Ferguson for this sign of dissent.
My friend, thank you very much indeed. James Healer, political correspondent with The Spectator. Thank you for your analysis. Thank you.
And that's an interesting point, isn't it, Prigozhin? I mean, he's not going to be able to survive this, is he?
Well, where's he? He's in Belarus.
Well, he's in Belarus now,
yeah.
But surely he can't guarantee surviving this.
Well, he's got 25,000 soldiers around him. Wow. A lot of equipment, who knows? 7:10 is the time. Eamonn and Ellie here at breakfast.
Now, the Duchess of York is recovering in Windsor following treatment for breast cancer.
Sarah Ferguson, who is now 63 years of age, was diagnosed after a routine mammogram.
Our GB News' royal correspondent Cameron Walker is here with us in the studio. And Cameron, this is very sad news. Obviously, we don't want to hear that Sarah Ferguson has been unwell, but good news in the sense that she is at home recovering.
Absolutely. I think it was a bit of a surprise that we found this out yesterday. We are told by her spokesperson that it was a very early form of the disease, and her doctors have told her that her prognosis is very good because it was caught early with this routine mammogram screening. And I think this is a sense, what I'm getting from Sarah Ferguson's spokesperson, that the Duchess of York wants to get this across because she knows she's very high profile. She's no longer a working member of the royal family, but she's still very much within royal circles, and her two daughters are heirs to the throne further down the succession. So she knows that by talking openly about her diagnosis, she perhaps can help other women going through the same thing. And she's actually expected to talk about this on her podcast, which is going to be broadcast or published today. It was recorded before her operation. She came out of hospital yesterday. It's King Edward VII Hospital, a very famous hospital in central London, which has treated the likes of the late Queen and Prince Philip as well. But she's back home now, according to The Sun, with her two daughters and Prince Andrew by her side. So it seems like everything is very optimistic.
Yeah, and they acted so quickly with her, bearing in mind her father died from prostate cancer, and there can be a link between a father having prostate and a daughter having breast cancer. So we wish her all the very, very best with that. Prince William, the Prince of Wales, I think incredible that he's taken upon his shoulders in a very serious way of ending homelessness in his lifetime. It is a brave claim, bearing in mind the state of the country, the state of our lack of social housing, our lack of housing in general. What do you think about what he's taken on?
It's an incredibly difficult task. He has conceded that himself, but Prince William wants to fulfil his mother's legacy. He was first taken to a homeless shelter when he was 11 years old. Centrepoint, a homeless charity, one of his first patronages, and I believe we've got a clip of Prince William launching his new homelessness campaign called Homewards.
What does home mean to you? Home is feeling safe and protected in my own bed.
Home is a safe space where I get to rebuild myself.
I don't believe it needs to be this way.
Home is community.
Provided for my family.
Belonging.
Which is why I'm launching Homewards. A programme that commits to working with 6 locations across the UK over the next 5 years.
Home is dignity.
Peace and comfort.
Wherever my dog is.
To show that it is possible to end homelessness here too.
Home is where I feel comfortable enough to be silly and laugh my head off with my kids.
Home is being me.
Cameron, you know, where I admire William on this is that the fact that he takes this on, the fact that he believes this is beatable, the fact that he can do something about this. I don't think many politicians would have the same mantra because it's such a task.
I think Prince William has this power to bring people around the table who wouldn't necessarily talk to each other another way. It's 6 locations around the UK over this 5-year project that Prince William has launched. And these 5 locations are expected to be blueprints to then be kind of spread out throughout the United Kingdom to try and eradicate homelessness. But you might be sitting there at home thinking, well, hang on, Prince William has 135,000 acres with the Duchy of Cornwall. He has 3 houses himself.
But that's why he's doing it.
That is exactly why. Yeah, exactly. And a spokesperson told me that he knows that he's in a very privileged position, but he also knows that his high profileness can really, really make a difference.
It does make a difference, Cameron. Thank you for telling us all of that. We're going to find out more now from Francesca Albanese. Francesca is the Chief Executive of the homeless charity Crisis. Francesca, good morning. Nice to see you.
Good morning.
Do you know what I think the great thing about this is? Cameron was talking there about how the Prince of Wales can unify people. And I'm sure Ellie's the same, we sit and talk to him and say, oh, this homelessness thing, it's awful, it's terrible. What can be done? What could you do? And I do nothing about it except give a few quid here and there, whatever it is. But I do nothing. I feel now that this man standing forward and saying, I'm going to have a go, I'm going to seriously take this on. You see, that inspires me to then say, well, how can I get involved in all of this?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you touched on it there. It's about the Prince using his profile, firstly, to raise kind of what the issue is and a better understanding of it, because we know at the moment homelessness is still a very stigmatised issue. So that's, it's really positive to see homelessness being linked directly to a safe and stable home, and everyone should have a home. But secondly, it's about that collaborative piece. So it's about working with everybody. So as a society, we should all want to do something to end homelessness. But it's also about saying it can be done, and it's that positive will. So we know that with the right policy solutions in place, with the right attitudes, with people wanting to do this, we can end homelessness, and we have seen it kind of go down in other countries.
Francesca, we're just talking to Cameron, our royal correspondent, about this in the studio. I mean, as the Duchy of Cornwall, he has 135,000 acres of land across Britain and has 3 homes himself. I mean, many people would say, is he the right person to front this kind of campaign? But the point being that he's got that power and he understands his privilege, but he's using it for good.
Exactly. So it's about using his privilege, talking about homelessness in a really positive way. But I think the other thing to say is, in an interview last week, the Prince did talk about the possibility of social housing on the Duchy of Cornwall land. And I think really importantly, the Homewards programme is putting genuinely affordable housing front and centre of the solution. So in the 6 areas that are going to be taking part in this, genuine affordable housing supply at a local level is going to be really key.
Of course. Francesca, though, tell us why this is all of our problems. All of us should be worried about this. Why?
Well, as a society, we should not be in a position where we're seeing homelessness going up, and that is what is happening at the moment. If one person is hurt through homelessness, we are all affected. But also, we can do something about this. In that Homewards film, it talked about Finland. So Finland has seen homelessness come down dramatically over the last 20 years. And in Scotland and Wales, we have seen governments commit to a vision of ending all forms of homelessness. And, it is possible to end it. Also, we know that homelessness has a massive impact on people, and we can do more to prevent it from happening in the first place. And, we should all care about it, but also we know it's possible to do something about it.
Is he talking pie in the sky, or is what he's dreaming, is it more than a dream? Is it achievable?
It's definitely achievable. I fully believe it's achievable, and I think it's the Homewards project is about demonstrating impact at a local level. So it's about showing it can be done, and then that gives inspiration to other areas. But it also shows it can work. So you can use the evidence, experience, the feasibility of what Homewards is going to achieve to translate that into other parts of the country. So we're actually following kind of what works to end homelessness and implementing policies that can do that.
Good luck to him. Good luck to you with your work and what you're trying to do. Francesca is the Chief Executive of the homeless charity Crisis. Thanks for your time this morning. Thank you.
It would be amazing, wouldn't it, if we can eradicate homelessness in this country? I mean, what a legacy that would be.
Brilliant.
His mum would be very proud. And now the time is 20 minutes past 7. Let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories.
The inquest into the death of Nicola Bulley will begin today. The mother of two vanished on the 27th of January after walking along the River Wire in Lancashire. Both media and the police faced criticism for how the case was handled. The inquest is expected to last for 2 days.
The 19-year-old who died on the Titan submersible brought his Rubik's Cube into the sub with him in a bid to break the world record. That's according to his mother. Christine Darwood told the BBC her son Solomon had applied to the Guinness World Records, and his father, who also died, had brought a camera to capture the moment.
Sir Elton John closed Glastonbury last night by headlining the Pyramid Stage, his final UK performance 53 years after his first. The performance included hits such as Rocket Man, Tiny Dancer, Your Song, and I'm Still Standing.
Well, coming up, as new data reveals insolvencies among under-25s increased substantially last year, we'll ask if young people are the biggest victims of the cost of living crisis.
OK, we're going to be debating that next.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle.
Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
£7. Is that what it is? I can't
It
see
is,
that.
yeah.
This is 25,
It is,
yeah. No, 5 could look like a 6 at that distance. Anyway, still to come on the programme this morning.
And the Yulin Dog Meat Festival in China returns this year with thousands of dogs being butchered and consumed. It's really awful stuff. At 7:45, we'll speak to the CEO of an anti-dog meat charity who's just returned from the region on a rescue mission. It's incredible.
I mean, you may have principles about eating any live animal or any meat, you know, like that, but I think the thing about dogs is they're so trusting.
I know.
They're so
innocent.
Yeah, and they have an intelligence maybe above some other animals, and anyway, it just seems awful.
It does.
Terrible. Prince William has vowed to make it his life's work to end homelessness. We were talking about that before the break.
Yeah, and at 8:45, we're going to get the view of Vanity Fair royal editor Katie Nicholl.
You can join in. Love to hear from you. Usual, gbviews at gbnews.com, or you can tweet at GB News. You'll all have your views about the cost of living crisis and how it's affecting you, and if you're doing anything to save money or not. But it seems that everybody across the country and every generation is affected by this.
Yes, but new stats out today says young people under the age of 25 are stuck in a cycle of living paycheck to paycheck, and they're more reliant on short-term debt to cover their costs.
So the question we're asking this morning, is it actually tougher for younger generations than older counterparts? There's Julie Cook. Julie says the average family is the real victim of the cost of living crisis.
Meanwhile, the CEO of Young Voices, Alex Cairns, says young people are fending for themselves more than ever. So, Alex, let's start with you then. So you think young people are suffering the most in all of this?
Good morning, both. Yeah, I do. So obviously we saw the report that came out this morning that obviously said that the biggest increase of unemployment from 2021 to 2022 was seen in the under 25 demographic. We know traditionally that young people earn the least. It's about 28,000 average salary for under 25s in London, and outside London about 24,000. You know, young people are really, really struggling. You know, very rarely get spoken about, which is why I really appreciate GB News obviously covering this, because I do think that young people get left behind in the narrative and don't really see any kind of support package from the government. And I think that actually historically we see that quite often in companies, young people get cut straight away. So they are struggling, and we do need to talk about it.
Julie, is there a league table of victims in all of this? We were saying that everybody's affected in some way, but do you think that young people have a case to argue that they're being particularly hard done by?
Morning. I feel sorry for anybody affected by this terrible cost of living crisis. I'm a mum myself, and my kids are going to be young adults in the not too distant future. But I think the real victims here are not really spoken about, and that is the working families who live in poverty. You know, we've now got 4.2 million children living in poverty in those households, and apparently we've got the highest ever number of working families living in poverty. And I think they're the sort of hidden ones in all this. We talk about people on benefits being in the poverty line, but we don't really talk about the families who are struggling. They are working, but we've got mums skipping meals to give meals to their children. We've got people going out to work 6, 7, 8 hours a day and still unable to get a house or to pay their rent, or they're living in such a way as hand to mouth, just like we've spoken about the young people. But I think, as I said, I feel sorry for anybody going through this, but I think the real victims are working families with children.
What about the need that under 25s have, Julie? You think there's a difference between what they want and what they need?
I do, and I'm not going to, I know it sounds like a generalisation, okay? I think there are a lot of young people who are really working hard and struggling. But, for example, I went to an event recently where I met a lot of young people under 25. They're all fantastic and I loved them. But I noticed many of them had the newest iPhone. They had all been to the coffee shop on the way. And I know that's a generalisation. And I know our other guest is going to shoot me down here. But I'm just saying, when I was in my early 20s starting in work, I was earning under minimum wage. Just as a journalist, I was trying to start my career. I didn't have money for coffees and things. I didn't have money for, well, phones were quite new then. I don't even think I had one. But the point is, I think there's a difference between what you want and what you need.
Alex, do you want to come back to that point?
Yeah, I mean, I hear this very often that, you know, young people are too bougie and they have their coffee, the newest iPhone, you know, they're vaping, you know, they should save money. And obviously, you know, in that sense, there won't be in a cost of living crisis. But fundamentally, I mean, they have to have some enjoyments, right? Young people earn the least. You know, a lot of them have to rent. A lot of them don't have the ability to go to the bank of mum and dad, like the media likes to say, that obviously, you know, young people can just go to their mum if they have an issue. And I think quite often it's an unfair narrative. Young people work hard, and I don't think them having, you know, a £2.50 latte and a £30 phone contract with an iPhone means that, you know, they're spending their money the wrong way. You know, I hear this quite often, and it does really upset me, to be honest.
And you know, Alex, I suppose sometimes what they would need for the deposit on a house, particularly somewhere like London, I don't know how anybody who earns 30 grand a year sort of lives in London. I genuinely don't, and how they keep a roof over their head, whatever. But sometimes the gap may seem just so massive that they think, well, we can buy a coffee, we can change our phone, but we could never dream of buying a house.
Yeah, I completely agree. The ability for young people to buy a house in, say, the next 5 years is just not going to happen, right? And actually, you're seeing a lot of young people that have to move out of London and quite far up the country to even consider. And even then, if they owe, you know, let's say they're earning 30,000, the average price of a house, say, outside London is about 250,000. Even then, it's still not realistic, which is why you see a lot of young people that rent, that have landlords that put up the prices, and you know, the ability for them to ever own a house is probably unrealistic. And I never hear anything from the government about what they're going to do to help young people own houses. You know, so young people often get forgotten about. They're not lazy. They don't spend lots of money on all of these bougie things that we're talking about. They're just trying to do their best. And fundamentally, you know, on the limited amount of disposable income, them spending a little bit of money on whatever they want, I think is fine. The bigger picture here, the macro picture here, is that they are struggling. They get cut by companies, as we're seeing from the data, and housing, you know, transportation, anything like that. Young people are struggling and really need support, and we're not seeing it.
Julie, answer me honestly. Would you like to go back to being 25 or under and making your way in the world again?
No, I wouldn't actually. I think It was hard enough then, so I agree it's very hard now, but I think it's hard for everybody. I think it's, as I say, to sound like a broken record, I think it's hardest for the working families with children. I've spoken to mums in the last 2 weeks on an article who are skipping meals to feed their children. And these are the forgotten people here. These are the people who go to work, so they don't figure on any benefits statistics. They go to work, they're paying tax, they're in the system, and yet they still have to go to food banks and feed their children. I mean, I think that's the true tragedy and frankly shame here.
Okay. Folks, thank you both very, very much indeed. We won't have solved anything. We'll have raised the issue. If you're 25 and under and you think you're finding it tougher than everybody else, let us know. Thank you very much indeed, Julie and Alex.
Thank you. I think it's really, really hard for under 25s, especially if you've gone to uni and you've got all the uni debt on top of everything else.
On top of everything else,
yeah. Because then you're trying to start out, like Julie said, sometimes on under minimum wage, and you know, you've got massive uni debt. You can see why you might want a latte, £2.50 latte, just to brighten the mood.
Brighten the mood.
I think I'm with Alex on that one, but let us know what you think. gbnews@gbnews.com.
OK, 26 minutes now before 8 o'clock. A very good morning to you as we start a new week. Stay with us. We'll be discussing a potential new suspect in the Stephen Lawrence case. We'll be going through the papers with Chris Akabusi and Dawn Neeson next.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views, and often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know,
All
Kate
sorts
Moss?
of Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We go through the newspapers now with Chris Akabusi and Dawn Neeson. Very happy to have you back again, guys. And there's a story just developing this morning in the Stephen Lawrence murder inquiry. The BBC's named a new suspect, Chris, in what is, I think, the most notorious racist murder in Britain.
Yeah. The chap's dead. That is the guy that, well, allegedly was involved in the murder some 30 years ago. So he's sort of evaded justice and, you know, been held accountable for his crimes. And there's another two chaps who are also suspected but have not been named like this fella. So I mean, of course, it was such a tragedy back in the day.
Yeah.
And
you say back in the day, Chris and Don, you know, it seems like yesterday in so many ways, but these guys are, well, how old are they? They're well over 50 now, aren't they?
They're 50 now. So they were kids back then, and so was Stephen Lawrence, obviously.
Yeah.
They were children back then, and they just half a dozen of them just attacked him while he was at the bus stop, if I can remember correctly, and took his life. And it was a barbaric incident. And, of course, his mother and his father really campaigned tirelessly to get justice for their son, Stephen. I've got a young lad who, I mean, he's 15, so not quite Stephen's age now, but the idea that his life would be taken away by some scum is just an awful thought process.
It was just such an amazing case. I mean, Stephen lost his life on the 22nd of April. He was just 18 years old, 1993. And it just, as you say, Eamonn, it feels like only yesterday, but it was an incredibly long time ago. And this new suspect...
Oh, Dawn, we've got an issue with your microphone, so we'll just come over to Chris for a second whilst we just get that fixed.
Stephen lost his life 22nd of April 1993. He was 18 years old at a bus stop. It's one of the worst racist murders in this country. The new suspect that the BBC have named is Matthew White, who died in 2021, aged 50. And this investigation has found the Met Police seriously mishandled key inquiries. This lad was identified at the time, but as we know with this case, it led to the Macpherson inquiry in 1998, which found that the Met Police was institutionally racist, problems they still seem to be having to this day. It also led to the overturning of the double jeopardy law, where you couldn't be tried for the same crime if you'd already gone through it. And so Gary Dobson and David Norris, two of the original suspects who had been acquitted, went back to trial, and in 2012, they were found guilty of murder and sentenced to life with a minimum of 15 years. Now, the original suspects have all sort of like, either served time or are still serving time, but this lad is the first time. But he should have been identified at the time, and it wasn't. So clearly mistakes have been made constantly.
More on that developing story throughout the programme this morning. Chris, I want to talk about trains now. If we just, this is in the Times, front page of the Times.
Yes.
And watchdogs ordered to bear teeth over rip-off costs is the headline. So there's a real plan for tickets to be discounted, but thwarted by the Treasury, it appears. What can you tell us?
Yes, OK, so what it appears, as I said, it's in the Times, that you've got this clash between the Department of Transport that wants to be innovative, creative and think of new ways of getting the trains back into use again and therefore increasing some income, and the Treasury, who are wanted to be more conservative, want to hold on to what they've got. There's been up to an 88% downturn in the use of trains post-COVID. Obviously, people have not returned back to work, and trains are very, very expensive, and so what the Department of Transport are suggesting is that we should go to like that's flexi sort of dynamic pricing that you get when you go in hotels or airlines, where when it's it's demand led. When it's very, very busy, you pay extra for the premium to go on the train. But when it's not busy, you think of innovative ways. For example, you could get on the train for £1. And although £1 doesn't seem a lot of money, football, West Ham. Oh, we had to get the insults. But no, we have matches sometimes where you can pay £1. Kids can pay £1, and you get them involved and into the train, or sorry, into football, and then all of a sudden they get hooked on the experience. And likewise, what I think the Transport is saying is, get people on there for £1, experience the luxury of train transport in the 21st century, and then you get them hooked on to more dynamic prices later on. So there is this sort of challenge now between these massive departments, the Treasury and the Department of Transport, as to what's the best way to go. Meanwhile, at the ranch, train services are hemorrhaging cash.
There's a guy called Trevor Nielsen. He's 50 years of age. He's a Californian businessman, and he's famous for funding the Just Stop Oil people, or the eco protesters and whatever. But he's having a say. He's saying enough is enough here. Yeah, he funded the Climate Emergency Fund. He's as you said, he's a businessman from America, and so it's basically Just Stop Oil, Extinction Rebellion, all of that lot came from his funding. And he's just given this interview saying, your stunts are harming the cause. Well, it's a bit like, really? Yeah, everyone thinks that. And he's the main donor. He's actually come out and said sort of like, you know, working people trying to get to their job, get their kids dropped off at school, survive the brutal cost of living crisis, and suddenly, at the same time, they've got a pink-haired, tattooed and pierced protester standing in front of their car. This is not doing our cause any good whatsoever. People are just getting frustrated and angry. So he has stepped down as chairman of the Climate Emergency Fund, and just said that it's you know, this is he stopping funding? Yes, yeah, he stepped down, yeah, and he goes... No, he's actually not donating any money. From what I can work out, he's actually stopped funding it as well, because he's so frustrated. He goes, it's just not a performance. It's not actually achieving what we want to achieve. And I think pretty much everybody out there has been thinking this from day one. I mean, we all support this issue, but the way people are going about it, like, you know, slow walking down the road, gluing themselves, chucking orange paint at things, it's just not helping, is it? So fair play to the man for talking out.
I mean, we're even seeing the splits, aren't we, between the eco-groups now. Extinction Rebellion have said we're just going to keep it peaceful and just protest in a normal way. Yeah. They don't even want anything to do with Just Stop Oil. Chris, let's have a look at the ugliest dog in the world, shall we?
Yes.
This is Scooter. Scooter.
Every dog has its day. Scooter is 7 years of age. He's now won a trophy and £1,800, £1,180, should I say, for being the ugliest dog. He was born with feet... He looks like a kangaroo. Well, exactly. He's got this cute tufts of hair, but no hair around the body. So cute tufts of hair on his head. He's hairless around his body. He's got a pig-like tail. He's a hanging out tongue. His legs are backwards. They didn't think he could walk, and that's why it's called Scooter, because he scoots along with his legs backwards. But hey, he's a winner. He is a winner. And you know, our next item, we would have to be asking you, could you eat Scooter? Literally, could you eat a dog? Because we're talking about this awful dog fest that goes on where animals are just butchered and dogs are butchered and served up as food. So we're going to be talking about that next, and that's why we sort of brought the ugly truth about Scooter in there.
He looks like a little gremlin, though.
Yes, he does, doesn't he?
Yeah.
He's got something cute about him.
Yes.
It's the tongue.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think he can put his tongue in. It just kind of hangs loose out of his mouth.
Yeah.
Oh, well. He's made some
5 heat waves are on the way, so we're not done with the good weather yet.
No, we're not, actually. It's going to get a bit wet and miserable in some parts of the country in the next couple of days, but 5 heat waves over the summer, and July scorchers, few watt scorcher, could hit 40 degrees. So that's going to be rather hot. And obviously the normal advice is, like, you drink water, da-da-da-da. But this is also good news for snakes, Eamonn. I know you like this story. Over 700,000 pet snakes are escaping from owners, and a lot of them are venomous. Now, we've only got 3 native snakes in this country: the adder, which is venomous, the grass snake, and the smooth. I like my snakes, and the smooth snake. And they are coming out more because they enjoy the hot weather, and it also makes them frisky.
Well, not in Ireland, it doesn't.
Well, you haven't got any snakes in Ireland, have you?
Thanks to St Patrick.
Yeah, but is that...
He went around dressed like you.
But in green?
In green.
And in 4-inch heels?
Yeah.
That would have been interesting at the time.
Guys, thank you very much indeed, because we want to talk about the little doggies that are being barbecued, and we're going to be with them in a short while. Dawn and Chris back in 40 minutes' time.
Thank you. Now, the time is 7:48. Let's bring you up to date with today's top stories.
The inquest into the death of Nicola Bulley will begin today. The mother of 2 vanished on the 27th of January after walking along the River Wire in Lancashire. Both media and police faced criticism for how the case was handled.
A new screening programme to detect lung cancers sooner will be rolled out nationally. The programme could provide almost 1 million scans earlier in the treatment. We'll speak to the Minister for Social Care just after 8 o'clock.
Former chief constables facing a misconduct hearing for allegedly making unwanted sexual remarks. He's Mike Vale, formerly of Cleveland Police, said that the remarks to a colleague in October and December 2018, he stepped down 2019.
The Prince of Wales is set to launch an initiative aimed at ending homelessness today. Prince William's 5-year project, called Homewards, aims to help make rough sleeping a thing of the past.
We have a busy little studio this morning. We're joined by Julia de Cadenet. Hello, Julia. Very nice to meet you.
Hi.
And who's your friend?
This is Debbie.
Debbie.
Hello, Debbie. How are you? Now, you've also brought a friend and a bigger friend of Debbie's. Who have we got here?
We've got Felicity.
That's Hi, Felicity. And who are you with, Felicity?
I'm Hayley.
Hayley. Oh,
I couldn't hear you.
Hayley is the dog.
Hayley. And Felicity has no mic, so we'll just... she's there for effect, yeah, to look very good. And the effect is this, because, Julia, we're talking about this Yulin Dog Festival, which a festival sounds jolly and gay and all sorts of ribbons and everything else, but it's not. Tell us the truth about all of this.
No, it's actually probably the most unfestival thing you can think of. It's a big city in the south of China where people gather for 10 days, starting around the summer solstice, and they eat dogs and get drunk.
Now, what are the stories about your little dogs here? So sorry, this one's called?
This is called Debbie.
Debbie.
And Debbie actually came from the festival.
Oh, dear.
So she's literally just arrived.
Who's our other doggie over
and
here?
And Felicity's our campaign dog now, and she came over a few years ago. She was going to suffer a similar fate.
So tell me this, when they come from China, do they only understand Chinese instruction?
Well, actually, they learn French first, Eamonn, because we bring them to Paris first.
Oh. Well, listen, young Debbie she's looking really comfortable, isn't she? Yes. She's looking really lovely there.
Considering she's just arrived, I think she's doing pretty well, don't you?
Yeah, we do. So what would happen to a doggie like Debbie?
So Debbie probably was somebody's pet, and she would have been stolen, rounded up by dog dealers, probably around Beijing area, and then driven thousands of miles tight in a truck in a cage with other dogs, and then taken down to the festival where people will eat her.
Oh. So that's her when she was rescued, and we've had butchery pictures as well, which is just like, you know, going into your local butchers and watch the meat being carved up and chopped up and whatever, and it's quite sobering to see when you see those pictures.
It is horrific, isn't it? Because we were talking about it earlier, even if you do eat meat, there's something so different about dogs, isn't there? I don't know whether that's the innocence or the love that you get from a dog, or the trust that you have. The relationship between humans and dogs is so different, isn't it? It's hard to believe, looking at Debbie, that anybody would want to eat her.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of a misconception because people say, oh, they're special dogs, they're different to normal dogs. Well, you're seeing yourself, aren't you? they're all kinds of dogs. And I think the thing that's most shocking is that they would butcher them in front of families and kids. So you've got your children there who are probably just thinking, oh, we're going out for the day. The last thing they want is to see a pet butchered. So in our opinion, as a charity, we feel it's like a, not very kind to the children as well to have to watch that.
Julia, are you a meat eater?
I'm not, no.
I'm not surprised you're not.
I mean, I'm not a hardline vegan.
Yes.
I was lucky, I grew up not eating meat. But I believe, because our campaign, what we try to do is we try to engage people in a friendly way, so we're non-judgmental.
No.
I mean, I'm always saying to people, don't eat meat.
But I have, I rescued a dog 12 years ago, 13 years ago, and it changed my life about everything. And where I'm really disgusted with myself is that I still eat meat. I couldn't, it opened up my eyes to animals in general and how we should have a better relationship with them. But my dog communicates back to me, so I could never really think of eating a dog. And I'm sure if you had a horse or a pony or something, you would feel exactly the same. But there is something different. I mean, it should make us all wake up and think, whether it's a cow we're talking about or a sheep or whatever, it's not right.
I think so. Well, I suppose what would happen was, because I've seen it with my own eyes, I don't wish to be too graphic on a Monday morning, but the dogs are also used for fur as well, and it would be akin to going down, say, Oxford Street, and you see them being slaughtered in front of you for fur. So I guess if you saw that with other animals, it might put you off.
Right, well, what are you asking people to do? What can people do? OK,
well, as a charity, we are desperately underfunded, Eamonn, because we're all run by volunteers, and we have a large shelter of more than 500 dogs in China that we set up, which we have to feed and care for and find them homes. So we always ask people, if they can, to maybe buy a T-shirt or put a small donation to us. That would really help us. Other things we ask for is for people to come along to our events and help us with education, because the more we educate people in a friendly way, the more people can connect with different animals. They can perhaps think about what they're doing and maybe make small changes, but in a, not in a hard-line way, in a way that we think would have a sustainable difference. And, of course, our best-case scenario would be if we knew any lovely people that happen to be flying to China for business or on holiday, not to do anything gruesome, but to act as a flight volunteer to bring some of our dogs back.
Gosh,
that would be amazing, Eamonn, if you could come.
Yeah.
Get yourself off to China. You can adopt another dog.
Yeah.
You definitely could. I'd adopt little Debbie here. She's absolutely gorgeous, looking so comfortable there. And she's only been in the country how long?
Well, I just brought her. She came to Paris about a week ago, and I drove her overnight to bring her here today, yeah.
Well done, you, and thank goodness there are people like you.
We believe, Eamonn, just that when it comes to adoption, we know that a lot of people, they get a little bit like, oh, I haven't got a garden, I live in an apartment in London. But actually, for us, we're happy as long as you can love the dog, and we're really happy if elderly people would like to take on one, and we're always around. So,
to help to back up
100%,
if it gets too much. And the love that you give will be nothing like the love you'll get back. But this is a lychee and meat festival. How do those two things go together?
Lychee wine, it's an alcohol.
Oh, is it?
They make a very strong wine, spirit drink, and they drink that,
Well, I don't know if Debbie's been drinking it this morning, but something should be well and truly. Amanda, we've got to go, or Julie, sorry, we've got to go. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having us today.
Thank you for the work that you do.
We really just, because we're a London-based charity, we started here. We're not very far from you. We always welcome volunteers to our events. We're at the Piccadilly Animals Fair at the weekend. So anyone that wants to join us, help with any skills in any way, they're very welcome.
So your charity is No to Dog Meat?
It is, and our website's notodogmeat.com.
Yeah. No to Dog Meat, all one word.
Does what it says on the tin, Eamonn.
Good. Thank you very much.
Julia, thanks so much.
Thanks for having us.
Great work that you do. Thank you for saving these beautiful dogs.
Talking more about Russia, Vladimir Putin, what's his future? Britain told to prepare for the collapse of government in Russia after this.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio, and online.
Join the live desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Britain told to prepare for the fall of Putin as America's top diplomat warns of cracks in the Russian regime.
Good morning, it's 8 o'clock on Monday, the 26th of June. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn Holmes and Ellie Costello.
Wherever you're watching, wherever you're listening from, thanks for your company and leading our news this morning. Britain must prepare for the sudden collapse of the Russian leadership, according to government assessments, following the attempted coup at the weekend. It comes as the US Secretary of State warns that the insurrection shows cracks in Putin's power.
People are more likely to die from treatable conditions in Britain than in other rich countries. That's according to a major new study which links the problem to a lack of NHS resources. We'll speak to the Minister for Social Care in a few minutes' time.
The Duchess of York has undergone treatment for breast cancer after it was caught early during a routine mammogram. Sarah Ferguson returned to Windsor this weekend, where she's recovering with her family.
The Prince of Wales will unveil a plan to eradicate homelessness with a pledge to make it his life's work to ensure that everyone has a safe and secure home.
And bowing out in style, Elton John closes Glastonbury 2023 with an unforgettable performance before hanging up his microphone as he prepares to retire.
And after the joint hottest day of the year so far, we'll have your latest weather update as conditions begin to turn.
After a hot and humid weekend, Monday offers many of us something a little bit fresher. Join me later for the full weather forecast.
Did you have a good weekend? Did you cope with the heat well?
Well, just about. I was at Ascot on Saturday, as were you.
As were I.
And it was boiling.
I bet you my hat was hotter than your hat.
Yeah.
Yes.
It was. How were you
coping?
coping?
A funnel. It was very, very warm.
Yeah.
I mean, temperature was edging 30 degrees on
It really
Saturday.
was. It was baking.
And then, you know, top hat and tails and all that sort of thing. It was very, very heavy going.
And you have to keep it on as well, don't you?
You do have to keep it on.
See, I didn't realise that.
If you're in the certain areas, you have to keep it on, yeah. But anyway, I suppose it's better than the alternative, which is a miserable summer. It was very, very nice. And I wonder, did it make Glastonbury go better? I wonder, is a very hot Glastonbury more preferable than a very wet Glastonbury?
I'd say so. Less mud.
Yes, I would think so. I would think so.
Would you go to Glastonbury?
No.
No, neither
No,
would
I can see.
That's that.
I can honestly say, I looked at it, I examined it, I thought, there is nothing about that would attract me. Not the acts.
Really? Not even Sir Elton John?
No, yeah, if I want to see Sir Elton John, I want to see him in the Royal Albert Hall, don't I?
Oh.
I want a padded seat.
In a padded seat.
Nice, you know, air-conditioned area. Whatever, what do I want to stand there for? And I'd have to have a big glass of something in my hand, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
And everybody's... He's a rocket man, rocket man.
Well, apparently it's like 2 miles from the campsite to the stage.
That's it. And me and my legs and all that. It's not going to happen.
I
It's
think
not going to work.
you sit at home and you watch it on the screen. It's
But
best
if you're
for you
watching
anyway.
us from your tent this morning, a very good morning to you. We'll be live from Glastonbury very, very shortly.
Yeah, I hope you had a wonderful time as well. Now, to our top story, and internal government assessments have warned that the UK should prepare for the sudden collapse of the Putin regime. That's following an attempted coup by Wagner Group mercenaries.
Well, yesterday, the American Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, said that the insurrection showed that cracks are beginning to show in Putin's power and warned that this is not the end of the story.
Well, let's speak now to our national reporter, Paul Hawkins, who's been keeping us across the story over the weekend. And Paul, it's remarkable, really, on the front page of the Times this morning, that Britain's being told to prepare for the fall of Putin.
Yeah, it's quoting a senior government source in the Times. Look, the UK government will have prepared for all the outcomes. So, frankly, preparing for the fall of the Putin regime would have been one of them. Perhaps we shouldn't really be surprised about that. This morning, we've seen Sergei Shoigu, the Russian defence minister, visiting troops. I don't know if we've got pictures of that to show you, but we don't know when... Here he is. We don't know when these pictures were taken, by the way, but we do know that it is significant that they've been broadcast this morning, because this is the first time we've seen Sergei Shoigu since the attempted mutiny on Saturday. And so we think that the point of this broadcast is to show that he's still in charge and that he is still leading the troops. And, of course, it'll also be a message to the Wagner fighters, many of whom took part in that attempted coup on Saturday, that, OK, the boss, Yevgeny Prigozhin, may be gone. We think he's in Belarus. We don't know that for certain because he never confirmed it himself, but he's gone. And in terms of what they do now, they have been offered as part of that deal. There was amnesty, of course, for the Wagner fighters, all criminal charges dropped, Yevgeny Prigozhin sent to Belarus, and also they could sign a contract whereby they are folded into the Russian military. So one would have thought that, and as I said, we don't know when those pictures were taken, but broadcasting that is a message, especially to the Wagner fighters, that they could, that effectively Sergei Shoigu is now in charge. They could sign up now to fight directly for the Russian state. And it's also a message as well to the Russian people that, the government is still in charge, that Putin's still there, and that Sergei Shoigu as well is still running the show.
And Putin will want that image going out to the Russian people in particular, because we did see pictures over the weekend, didn't we, of Russian general public greeting the Wagner Group mercenaries, with flowers and hugs and wanting to take selfies with them. I mean, Putin's come out of this looking pretty weak. I mean, what next for Putin, do you think? Do we even know where he is?
Well, we don't know where he is. There was some reports that he'd left the capital, Moscow, on Saturday, but there are a number of presidential planes, so that wasn't confirmed. We're wondering, where is Yevgeny Prigozhin at the moment? What's going to happen to him? Putin in the past was asked, can you forgive anything? And he said, I can forgive everything. The one thing I can't forgive, though, is treason. So Yevgeny Prigozhin would be advised to watch his back, but in terms of Vladimir Putin's authority, certainly this is the biggest challenge to his authority for decades. On Saturday, he went on TV. He gave an impromptu speech in which he mentioned a criminal adventure, a grievous crime, treason, blackmail, and terrorism. It's a grievous crime, and then just a few hours later, there's a deal done where all the charges are dropped. So one would have thought, is his authority dented by this? Many experts think that there could be a backlash now and that Vladimir Putin may crack down. Also, what happens to the Wagner fighters as well? We think there's somewhere between 40 and 50,000 still fighting, many of them in Ukraine. Around about 80% of them, according to the Americans, are prisoners. What will they do now? Who will they fight for?
Yeah, still many questions. It's not the end of this story, is it? Paul, really good to see you this morning. Thank you.
9 minutes past 8 o'clock. People in Britain are less likely to survive treatable conditions such as breast cancer or strokes than those in other rich nations. This is a new landmark study. It was a review by the King's Fund linked to the issue of below-average funding for the NHS, resulting in a lack of equipment and staff. Well, let's speak to the Minister for Social Care, Helen Whately, to learn more about this. Helen, good morning to you. You know what? We could start with the negative stuff, but I don't want to start with the negative stuff. I want to start with the positive stuff, because here we are. We're in the 75th birthday year for the NHS, and you have a new initiative. We're talking about Sarah Ferguson in the papers today, doing well after her breast cancer operation because of early detection. And you, Minister, think you can do the same for lung cancer. Tell us how.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And I wish the Duchess of York well as she recovers from her breast cancer treatment. And actually, it's wonderful that she's speaking about that experience and encouraging other people to go for breast screening when they're invited to do that. Because we know screening makes a huge difference to your prospects for having cancer detected early. And if cancer is picked up early, then the treatment is more likely to be effective. Today, we're announcing the rollout of a national targeted lung cancer screening programme. The reason we're doing that is because lung cancer is one of the biggest killers. It kills around 35,000 people a year. The reason, very sad, it kills so many people is because too often, around 70% of the time, people's cancer is detected late, and if it's picked up late, the prospect of successful treatment, sadly, is much lower. What we know we do if we do targeted screening is then we can pick up the majority of cancers early. In fact, around 76% of the cancers then treated early, and then your treatment is much more likely to be effective, and that makes a huge difference to your survival rate from cancer. So we're going to be inviting people in for assessment and then screenings if they're at higher risk of lung cancer. Those invitations will be for people who are aged between 55 and 76, who are at higher, 74 rather, who are at higher risk of lung cancer, particularly, for instance, having a history of smoking. I should say, to reassure viewers, that actually actually most people who then are screened won't actually be diagnosed with lung cancer. It's only around 1 in 100 who get that diagnosis. But for those people who are diagnosed, that can make all the difference to your prospects for survival. So when you do get an invitation, it's really important to come forward for screening.
Minister, how intrusive is the testing? When you say you can test for lung cancer, how would you test?
What will happen is people who are identified as at risk, for instance, because they have a history of smoking, will be invited, first of all, to have a phone call to assess their risk, and then for those who are indeed assessed as high risk, they will then be invited for a low-dose CT scan. It's a very quick scan. I'm told it will just take a few minutes, and then that is then subsequently reviewed, and for people that there might be a concern about, they're then invited in for further investigation. In fact, some people who are then invited in, what it will be is just keeping an eye on whether they might have seen some nodules in their lungs, might not necessarily be cancerous, but need to be kept an eye on. Other people will then start treatment for lung cancer. But what we know then is that if your lung cancer is detected early, that would then be the majority of people, at least 60% of people so are likely to then survive 5 years. That's much better than if it's detected late, when only around 4% of people survive 5 years.
Minister, I've got to ask you about the King's Fund report that was published this morning. It says that people in the UK are less likely to survive treatable conditions such as breast cancer and strokes here in the UK. I mean, that doesn't make for good reading, does it? That must cause you a lot of concern.
Of course it causes me concern to hear, and I will read that report when I get back to the office after these interviews and clearly look at it. But what is really important actually is that we take the steps we need to diagnose conditions like cancer early. We know that's the big thing that we need to do to improve outcomes. That's why we have our breast screening programme. That's why we're rolling out this targeted lung cancer screening programme. It's why the NHS has been encouraging people to come forwards if they're worried that they might have symptoms of other cancers like bowel cancer. And since the pandemic, a lot more people have been coming forward with concerns about that. And the NHS has actually been doing a really good job at faster than ever before, either diagnosing or giving people the all clear, and for the first time ever reaching what's called our faster diagnosis standard on that, because it's really important to get the diagnosis quickly so then people can move forwards to treatment. But really focusing on faster diagnosis and then enabling treatment is part of what we need to do to help the NHS for the next 75 years indeed. The other thing the government's going to be doing this week as we celebrate 75 years of our National Health Service is announcing a long-term workforce plan. This is a historic thing for a government to do. It's never been done before. It's planning ahead for the future needs over the long term of the NHS workforce to make sure that we've got the doctors, nurses and healthcare professionals we need to secure the future of our National Health Service.
Yeah, we're going to hear more from Rishi Sunak this week, as you say, on that 15-year workforce plan. But how is Rishi Sunak planning to get more doctors and nurses through the door when we haven't got any money to give them?
Well, actually, at the moment, we are spending record amounts on our National Health Service. We're spending around £150 billion a year. The NHS has given at the last budget an extra 14 million for healthcare over the next 2 years. We know that there are these huge pressures on our National Health Service, so that's why we're putting in extra investment to help it recover from the pandemic, which of course was very tough for the NHS, tough for doctors, nurses, other health professionals at the front line, and has meant that we have indeed many people who didn't receive treatment during that time now waiting for treatment. One of the Prime Minister's priorities, 5 priorities, is to cut those NHS waiting lists, and the NHS is making progress on that. The NHS has virtually eliminated people waiting over 2 years for treatment last year, and this year has virtually eliminated people waiting over 18 months, so bringing down the long waits that we've seen develop since the pandemic. And then moving through into next year, we expect to be able to actually bring down the numbers waiting altogether. We know that's really, really important to people not to have to wait for treatment.
Minister, thank you very much indeed. Thank you, and happy 75th birthday, not you personally, but the NHS, of course. And Helen Whately is the Minister for Social Care. Thank you for your time this morning.
Yeah, and let us know what you made of Helen Whately's interview there. GBViews at gbnews.com.
A 2-day hearing into the death of Nicola Bulley begins today. The mother of 2 vanished after dropping her daughters at school, then taking her usual dog walk along the River Wire in Lancashire.
Well, our North West of England reporter Sophie Reaper has been looking back at the case.
A missing persons case that captured the attention of the world. Back in January, Nicola Bulley disappeared. She dropped her 2 children off at the local primary school and then proceeded to take her dog Willow on their daily walk along the River Wyre. At 9:01 that morning, she logged into a Teams call on her phone. 32 minutes later, that same phone was found by another dog walker on a bench by the bank of the river. Within hours, Lancashire police had already launched a search for the mother of 2, and by the following day, a major missing persons operation had begun. Helicopters, mountain rescue, underwater search teams, they all worked in unison in an attempt to locate Nicola. A few days later, Lancashire police also reached out to the public for their help.
We appeal for anyone who may have been driving through the village of St Michael's last Friday morning at about 9:15, or who may have dashcam footage that could be of use to us, or people who may have been dog walking in the area or on the towpath to come forward.
Tributes poured in as the local community banded together to do their bit. Then, 10 days after she'd first gone missing, images were released which showed Nicola packing up the car to take her children to school. The following day, specialist dive team SGI began an in-depth search of the River Wyre using specialist sonar equipment. Hope was renewed, but after just 3 days, the team stopped their search, with their leader, Peter Faulding, describing the case as a complete mystery. Lancashire police continued their search, following the course of the river, even eventually reaching its mouth near Fleetwood. Finally, on February 19th, news broke that a body had been recovered from the River Wyre. The following day, the world watched on as the agonising truth was revealed.
Sadly, we are now able to confirm that yesterday we recovered Nicola Bulley from the River Wyre. Nicola's family have been informed and are of course devastated. Our thoughts are with them at this time, as well as with all her loved ones and the wider community.
After a long 3 weeks, the family's worst nightmare had come true. Sophie Reaper, GB News.
I really hope that family get answers at that inquest.
Yeah.
It's an awful case.
We'll take a break there, and coming up, we're going to be live from Glastonbury. Elton John, his big night last night, he bid an emotional farewell. He says it was his last live performance in the UK, but was it?
Stay with us.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. The time is 8:23. Still lots to come on today's programme. As Prince William vows to make it his life's work to end homelessness, we'll find out all about his plan from Vanity Fair royal editor Katie Nicholl at 8:45. And forget heat waves, is the UK experiencing a cheat wave? As a new report finds sign-ups to a marital affairs website increased during the hottest day of the year. We'll find out why the hot weather causes people to wander. And remember, you can join in any of our discussions this morning by emailing gbviews@gbnews.com, or you can tweet us at gbnews. Now, Elton John closed Glastonbury 2023 last night, and what he says was his final UK show ever before retirement. Ah, love him. Well, showbiz reporter Stephanie Tecchi was there to witness it. Lucky, lucky woman. She joins us from Glastonbury now. Stephanie, he's 76 years old. I Googled it after our last chat, and he still sounds incredible, doesn't he? How was the show?
It was amazing, Ellie. I'm quite surprised that this is Elton John's final farewell for UK touring. He's got a few more concerts to do around Europe, but last night he said it might be his last show in the UK. He's been touring for 50 years, so he wasn't short of songs yesterday to play to the crowd, and that's the good thing about Glastonbury, having icons such as Elton John close the stage and close the festival. It was quite poignant because it was his first time performing at Glastonbury. He said he didn't think he would ever perform here, but I couldn't think of a more fitting place for him to end his touring career. Before the big concert yesterday, there was a lot of rumours about the big four that he was going to bring out, and there were names such as Lady Gaga, Dua Lipa, maybe Ed Sheeran. But Elton actually flipped it on his head, and he actually brought a whole host of new talent. He brought people such as Stephen Sanchez, Rima Kalma, and also Brandon Flowers. So it was a bit of a shock. People weren't expecting those four to come out.
How incredible, though, as you say, such an incredible place to bow out and using the opportunity to bring in new talent as well. I mean, it is just amazing. And you're at Worthy Farm now. You've been there all weekend. Give us your review of the weekend. What were the highlights for you?
Oh, the good thing about Glastonbury, obviously, is the camping family that you make. It's a camping community. So in between shows, you are really getting friendly with your neighbours. But it has been quite a busy weekend for good music acts. One of the sad moments was with Lewis Capaldi. Ahead of Glastonbury, he took 3 weeks off so he could be in perfect shape to perform on stage. He suffers from Tourette's, and unfortunately, he could not finish his performance. But luckily, his crowd were there as the backup singers, and they finished songs like Someone You Love, and it was quite emotional for him. He's announced that he will be taking a break from music, which is a shame because he's just starting out in his career and he's got so much things that could be ahead for him. But also we had Lana Del Rey, who was got in a spot of controversy because she actually started her set 30 minutes late. She blamed it on her hairdresser, said that her hair hadn't been styled in time. In Glastonbury, they have a strict policy after 11:45, no more music. So her set actually got cut off, which she wasn't best too pleased about. But next time she'll know to be on time when she's at Glastonbury.
Yeah, she's learnt her lesson, hasn't she? And I heard she was actually continuing to having her hair styled actually on stage.
She was, Ellie. She was trying to do the multitasking. She was trying to make it look glamorous. But to be honest, I don't think the fans were impressed. You know, half an hour waiting at the Pyramid stage sometimes feels like 2 hours. So you do have to respect your audience in that sense. But she did put on a show. But whether it was a good one, I think the critics are out.
Yeah, and how's it been with the weather, Steph? Because it's been about 30 degrees, hasn't it?
It's been a scorcher on Worthy Farm. You know, they've been telling us all weekend to stay hydrated, make sure we've got our sunscreen on. But it's a lot when you're in a field with up to 200,000 people at different places. I think it makes the heat a bit overbearing, but I think it's only a small price to pay for Glastonbury. We've had years before where it's been quite muddy, so I'm glad I didn't need to bring out the wellies out this weekend.
Steph, were you staying in a tent?
Yes, Eamonn, I was staying in my leopard print tent, which I've named Scary Spice. It's more like a glamping tent. So I've made a lot of friends this weekend, all because of my leopard print tent.
Well, you look very well on it for having the basic facilities. They're very, very good. Thank you very much for all of that.
You look amazing, Steph. Thanks so much. Get home safe now. Good luck with the journey.
The epitome.
Take care, guys.
Thank you. The epitome of glamping there from Stephanie.
Yeah. I want to know her setup.
You what?
Need a video tour.
Uh-huh.
I bet she has hair and makeup and everything in there. It's a great look, isn't it, that leopard print tent?
Even if they give me hair and makeup, I still wouldn't.
Oh, don't say that,
no. Not for me.
It would be great fun.
Still to come, move over Elton John, because Glastonbury was all about... Apparently there were trampolining nudists there.
Wow. A little bit of everything. Chris Akabusi and Dawn Neeson are going through the papers with us. That's next.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the people's channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Monday morning newspapers, going through those for us this morning. Chris Akabusi and Dawn Neeson. And Chris, you want to talk, which I think, if I was an MP, this is what I'd do. You've a slim majority, you've got to defend your majority. It's coming up to election time within the next year. I'll be spending less time in London and more time in my constituency, which is what they seem to be doing.
Absolutely. I mean, my question would be, why are you not doing it anyway? I mean,
yes.
You are an MP, you've got a local constituency, why are you not in it anyway? But okay, so the Tories are woken up to that. They've got something called the 80-20 campaign. That is the 80 most tight and marginal seats. They want those MPs to spend 20% of their time in the local community, and they're hoping to win 20% of those seats. So they're marginal, but they want to make the go of winning 20% of those seats. They say, act like a local councillor. No, don't act, be one. So you expect your local MP, if you've got a marginal seat, to be kissing babies, going to fetes and...
But I suppose they've got to be in Westminster for votes and things like that.
Yes, yeah.
Committees.
Of course they've got a real job to do in London, but a lot of them have the London tours, etc., and neglect...
Yeah.
I mean, how often do you see your local MP?
Well, this is a very good point, because he's a cabinet MP, and my point is it must be very difficult on them if they've got the added responsibility of sitting in cabinet and talking about Russia and whatever, as opposed to talking about potholes.
Yes, sure. But you can find a day in a week to be in your locality. You know, it's your local party chairman that's elected you, it's the people there that have supported you. You need to be there. We need to see, you've got to raise your visibility. And that's what the Tories are going to do.
And the Tory MPs will be more than aware of those looming by-elections, 4 of them coming up.
Yes,
it's not
exactly.
looking good, is it?
No, it's not looking good for them. And, well, you know, who knows? I mean, when John Major went into the last election in 1992, was it? Labour had a huge lead then in the polls, and yet John Major won it for the Tories. So it's not a foregone conclusion, but as you say, you know, the by-elections, Ellie, but people will always in a by-election vote against the government, won't they, no matter what their local councillor or their local MP is like. So it's not necessarily a prediction of what's going to happen in the general election. But
Dawn, let's talk about shrinkflation and how it affects wine and alcohol. This affects beers as well. I've heard this and I've seen this happening with ciders, with beer, with wine as well. What's going on?
Yeah, well, basically what they're doing is to save themselves money and increase their profits still. What they're doing sneakily is they're actually charging the same price for a bottle of wine or a bottle of beer, but making less alcohol available in it. So rather than a bottle of wine being, I know this off by heart, rather than a bottle of wine being sort of like, 12, 13%, it's now sneakily, if you read the small print on the bottom of the label, which I do, it's now 11%, but the same price. So less alcohol, still charging the same amount of money.
But they pay less duty on that to the government.
They do, yes, indeed.
Yeah.
There is that line as well. But it's just like, you just feel like, how much money are they making in profits, all these companies now as well? And the supermarkets are doing it as well, aren't they? It's like, there is a cost of living crisis. Of course there is, but how much money are supermarkets actually making by profiteering on these
Well,
things?
they say 3%. They'll have a 3% margin. Well, that's like, so for every £100 you spend, they make £3 on it.
But you know what, Eamonn? What I don't understand is how some supermarkets have managed to actually reduce the prices of their basic goods this year. I mean, I think Lidl and Aldi were two of the ones, obviously the budget change. And even Waitrose have kept prices fairly stable. And yet others have had to put their prices up by 3-4%.
And the
so
rest.
it doesn't, and the rest. But it doesn't actually make sense why some supermarkets can do it and others can't.
Yeah.
Well, they might have different distribution costs, etc., etc. But that's
And the poor farmers and manufacturers are the ones who get squeezed on this as well.
That's exactly it, Eamonn. It's actually the suppliers, and in particular the farmers. And there was a story about milk supply as well. They're just supermarkets are ripping off.
With that story, though, I was wondering whether the difference in percentages actually affects the tastes, and whether you would go for a weaker wine, and if so, when would you go for a weaker wine? I was thinking, like, in the hot summer days, maybe you can have a glass or two of wine before you come to work in the afternoon, because it's half the cost. But if it doesn't taste very nice, then it's not worth drinking.
What is this weaker wine you speak of? It's not happening. Not happening.
It's not good, though, is it? I mean, it feels like we're being fleeced every which way, isn't
Yeah,
it? We're
exactly,
in the supermarket at the moment. And that's
Yeah.
the thing that people are feeling, isn't it, in their pockets when they go to the supermarket and you walk around with a basket of food.
Let's talk about mushrooms, because we're not being fleeced by mushrooms.
There's a seamless link, isn't there? Right. OK, this is a story from the Daily Star, and it is basically a private school child who wants to identify as a mushroom. Now, the school hasn't been identified, but it's a senior school, and basically critics are saying this has got to stop now because, we've had all the recent stories about kids identifying as mostly cats, it seems to be, for some reason. But this one, it wants to be identified. And look, these children either have mental health issues, in which case they need help and support, not adults condoning their behaviour and encouraging it, or they are just literally taking the mickey out of the adults around them. Now, the reason this child might be identifying as a mushroom is because it might be linked to the Super Mario Brother character, which is obviously a mushroom. I have no idea. But it's just like, can we just stop actually encouring children?
Indulging them.
Indulging them, that's the word I'm looking for, Eamonn.
Should you not
It
be sort of
really
like
is.
phoning for mental health or something if you have a pupil that says, I am a mushroom today, or I am a pussycat, rather than saying, yes, of course you are, meow,
exactly.
you should be saying, get me the number of the doctor.
Yeah, because
here.
if the child genuinely believes that, and I think a lot of them are maybe now sort of like joining some sort of trend or just taking the mickey, it's like support them with mental health, because that's what they need.
Come on, if all of us were at school now, well, I know me and Akabusi up here would say, what are you today, Chris? I am a pussycat. And I'd say, I'm a rabbit, or I'm a fox, I'm going to eat you, or whatever. And you would be doing it to waste time in the class, to mess about, whatever.
Yeah.
Would you be very well behaved and not do that?
Well, no, but we had a girl at school that identified as a cat, but she was just bullied.
Yeah.
Which is the way it used to be.
She actually identified.
Yeah, she had a little bell when she'd run along the corridor.
Wait a minute. What year was this?
Oh, she was year 7, so 11 years old. I mean, too old for any of that.
No, so how long ago? 20 years ago?
No, it was last year. I mean, Ellie is
yeah, it was
very
last
young.
year, Eamonn.
So this is not a new thing? So people did go
Yeah,
around
it's been going on. Yeah, but it wouldn't have been accepted, and the school wouldn't have called her a cat.
Yeah.
They would have
But she would have been
indulged
bullied
her,
for
yes.
it. Yeah, so, I mean, things
Yeah.
have changed in the last however many years.
But funny, they do have that phrase in Belfast. You're a wee cat, you are. Like, it's a derogatory term.
Yeah,
You know.
it means you're like...
You're horrible.
Not very nice.
You're a little cat.
I just think if you've got a child identifying as a cat in the classroom and another one identifying as a dog, what's going to happen?
And it's a massive
You're gonna fight like
distraction
cats
for
and dogs.
learning as well.
Yeah.
Right,
Oh,
I want to talk about trampolining now at this was at Glastonbury, was it?
It was, yeah, absolutely.
Right, so tell us more.
Just in case you think that Glastonbury has gone fully corporate, it hasn't. There is still that hippie vibe going on, Eamonn, and there is an area there for naturists. It's behind a very high fence, and you know you can go there and you can sort of like have a giant whirlpool bath thing, which just sounds horrible with lots of other naked people, and you can also do trampolining. Naked.
Oh dear.
And Chris did volunteer
Yeah,
to
right.
demonstrate this for us.
Yeah,
But we persuaded him not to. Obviously, the wine wasn't quite strong enough. But I just want to ask, what is it with naturists and bouncy sports? Why do they
Must enjoy it.
But I mean, it's not going to be comfortable, is it?
Yeah, it wouldn't be very...
But this is why you were meant to be demonstrating, just to prove how uncomfortable it was.
Could I have my jockstrap on, please?
No, naked.
You'd die of
Put us in the
whiplash.
naked. But evidently, it was very popular because it was very hot down at Glastonbury. So lots of people wanted to get into the naturist area and sit in a giant bubble bath with other naked people.
Sweaty naked people.
No. Yeah, from a trampoline.
So you would listen to the music and naked trampoline, or listen to the music. Sorry, naked trampoline instead of listening to the music.
Yeah, well, you can hear the music as well, but you're not obviously at the front row watching the acts. You are bouncing up and down naked on a trampoline. And the high fences just weren't quite high enough to stop the people bouncing very high. So you might have got an eyeful if you were on your way to see Elton John.
Well, I'm
Imagine
sure.
walking past that.
No, thanks.
Yes, I'm
That's
sure
an
it
eyeful.
feels very free.
Oh dear.
I'll tell
It's
you what.
very uncomfortable, isn't
Yeah.
it? Whether you're a boy or a girl.
Guys,
Or even a cat.
thank you very much indeed. Before actually we move on, I wonder, did either of you have a view on Prince William and his initiative for homelessness?
I think it's fabulous. It would be a phenomenal legacy. It will be Prince William following in his footsteps of his mother, who introduced him and his brother to the homelessness in 1993.
Centre Point.
Centre Point, correct. That's exactly. And you know, making them aware how, and like all of us, you know, we've got our own home, safety, security, place to belong, and other people who are not as fortunate as ourselves. And he's instigating something where he's been materially involved. He's donating £500,000, and over the next 5 years, hoping to create a model that can be replicated throughout the nation. So
good luck to him.
Yeah, well done.
Good luck to him. Guys, thank you very much indeed. Dawn,
Thank
Chris,
you very
pleasure
much.
having you this morning. Thank you very much indeed.
Now the time is 8:44. Let's bring you up to date with today's top stories. And the inquest into the death of Nicola Bulley will begin today. The mother of two vanished on the 27th of January after walking along the River Wyre in Lancashire. Both media and the police face criticism for how the case was handled.
A new screening programme to detect lung cancer sooner will be rolled out nationally. The programme could provide almost 1 million scans and earlier treatment. The Minister for Social Care, Helen Whately, told us on the programme who they will be targeting.
So we're going to be inviting people in for assessment and then screenings if they're at higher risk of lung cancer. Those invitations will be for people who are aged between 55 and 76, who are at higher, 74 rather, who are at higher risk of lung cancer, particularly, for instance, having a history of smoking.
A Scottish Parliament committee has launched a public consultation on the tourism tax bill. If passed, local authorities could make changes to overnight accommodations such as hotels and B&Bs. The charges will be calculated based on a percentage of the cost, and the consultation runs until September.
So, as we were just mentioning a couple of minutes ago, Prince William is launching a major 5-year campaign which he hopes will end homelessness. He says homelessness shouldn't exist in a modern and progressive society.
Well, the programme is called Homewards, and it will work in 6 towns and cities, bringing together organisations and individuals to find local solutions to homelessness.
Well, here is what the Prince had to say.
What does home mean to you?
Home is feeling safe and protected in my own bed.
Home is a safe space where I get to rebuild myself.
don't believe it needs to be this way.
Home as community.
Provided for my family.
Belonging.
Which is why I'm launching Homewards. A programme that commits to working with 6 locations across the UK over the next 5 years.
Home is dignity.
Peace and comfort. Wherever my dog is.
To show that it is possible to end homelessness here too.
Home is where I feel comfortable enough to be silly and laugh my head off with my kids.
Home is being me.
Talk more about this. We're joined by Katie Nicholl. Katie's the royal editor at Vanity Fair. When I hear the man talk about this, I just fall back in admiration, because no politician would make that claim. So he's either very naive or he's deadly serious about this.
Oh, he's really serious about this. I've spoken to Prince William many times about homelessness. It's very interesting when you look, this is the start of his new reign, I suppose, as Prince of Wales, and this is what he is putting his stamp on. And if you think back to when he was 11, and Princess Diana took him to the Passage in Vauxhall, she introduced him to this idea that there was very much a different type of life outside of the palace walls, and that had a massive impact on William and on Harry. And homelessness is always something that's been very close to his heart. We've seen him take on environmentalism with the Earthshot campaign. We've seen him take on mental health. But I think this is really, really significant for him. So this is a 5 years, an ambitious project. And you're right to mention politics, because actually he does run the risk of being accused of getting political in this issue. I mean, we know that he's lobbied and spoken with Keir Starmer about this. He's spoken with the Levelling Up Secretary, Michael Gove. So he is in not dangerous territory, but he's certainly in territory where he could be slipping into a political arena. But for William, this is so personal. This is so important. One of the things that the Royal Foundation, who is going to be funding this project, has discovered in Britain, and I think this is shocking, is that 1 in 5 people has experienced homelessness. If you think about that, in today's society, in our sort of privileged society that we live in, 1 in 5, it is a shocking statistic. And William has done a lot to draw attention to that.
But I often think if we fell off the tracks, any of us, in terms of being able to rent or buy, it would be very, very hard to get back on again.
Absolutely. And one of the things that William has said, of course, as Prince of Wales, he's inherited the Duchy of Cornwall land. He's made it known that he's open to the idea of putting social housing on some of this vast estate in the country. Because in Finland, they've had a huge reduction in homelessness. And it's not about building more shelters for people to go and spend a night. It's about giving them a home. And once they've got a home and a permanent base, then you can deal with the underlying issues of drug addiction, people that have fallen out with their families, people who are literally at the end of the line. And I think we see that in William. There is a real compassion. And I think as Prince of Wales, there is an expectation that he will do something meaningful. If you think back to Charles, he set up the Prince's Trust with his naval severance, and that has helped millions of young people in the country. And so William's got a lot to live up to in that respect. And I think this is an area where he feels he can make a real difference. So today we're going to see him in London. We're yet to know where he's going to start this campaign, and he will be travelling over the next 2 days around the country, really putting the spotlight on this. And I think it's not just about saying this is an issue, it's about how we can deal with this as a nation, because it's wrong that 1 in 5 people in this country experience homelessness.
Yes, I mean, as he says, it's something that shouldn't take place in modern society. I mean, Katie, there's been criticism online about the huge privilege that, of course, Prince William comes from. He's got all of that Duchy of Cornwall land. He owns 3 homes himself.
Well, and also, can I just say, Ellie, one that's standing empty. Kensington Palace is 21-bedroom apartment. The Waleses, as they are now known, chose to leave Kensington for a quieter life below the radar, which I think most people can totally understand, to bring up their children away from the spotlight in a smaller 4-bedroom apartment in Windsor Great Park. However, you have this 21-bedroom apartment standing empty, and I think there is, people can ask legitimate questions about that. We'll find out what's going to happen with that space, but I think the fact that he wants to introduce social housing within the duchy is a move in the right direction. This is a prince, a future king, who slept rough It was 14 years ago, but he slept rough on the streets of Brixton, I think it was, or Blackfriars Bridge. Last year he was out selling The Big Issue. You know, I do think this is a personal thing, and I think it comes from an authentic and genuine intention to do what he can. It's about using his profile and his spotlight to change something he really believes can be changed.
And we've spoken about that before. What Prince William has is that soft power, doesn't he, of bringing people together. And he does come from this place of privilege, but he uses that as a force for good.
Absolutely, and I think what you're going to see with him and with Kate is that convening power. And just to mention their Heads Together campaign, you know, again, they succeeded in making something that wasn't really talked about part of the national conversation, and they do have great convening power. So he's going to be using that, and we're going to see that, I think, really displayed over the next couple of days.
What an achievement that would be if he was to see an end to homelessness.
Absolutely.
Or even a big dent in it in his lifetime. Could we talk about Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York, and this mastectomy that she's had? Very frightening.
Yes.
What are you hearing? Has she come through things well?
Yes, and I think she's actually recorded a podcast. She started a new podcast series before she went in for her surgery. That's released later on today, so it's going to be interesting to hear her speaking about it before going through this, what we're told was quite major surgery. Of course, she had no intention of knocking William off the front pages because this was his big campaign. She's not in the royal fold. She's ended up on most of the front pages today. But I think her message is very powerful, and it's very important to every woman out there that you know, the power of screening. If you can get this disease early, you can beat it. When you look at the statistics, life expectancy has massively accelerated with this disease. They can treat it, but, you know, she's raising awareness again, as many have before her. Check your breasts. Women, be aware of yourself. If something doesn't feel right, don't just think it's nothing. Go and get it checked out, because she had no symptoms. She was screened and they found something. And, you know, please God, she's going to live a very long, healthy life.
We really hope so. It could also be a reinvention for Sarah, couldn't it? Give her a direction.
Absolutely, and I think sometimes it takes someone with this sort of profile to come out and show people, you know, there's a message here behind all of this. And, you know, Sarah's been very much in the royal fold, but an outsider all of this time. And so possibly there is, you know, there is a role for her here. And on the subject of homelessness and homes, there is a bit of an argument going on about Prince Andrew and Royal Lodge, which is a huge 30-bedroom apartment. There's a lot of speculation that Prince Charles wants Andrew out. Well, Andrew and Sarah are divorced, obviously. They divorced back in '96. They still live together. They're still incredibly close. She's supported the Duke of York through his very difficult period of time, and they're living together at Royal Lodge, so he will be there helping her to recuperate. So the idea that they're going to move out anytime soon with this, I think they have a home for the time being. But we do wish her a speedy recovery. We wish her well, and I think we should be very grateful that she's standing up. And it's a very brave thing to do.
Yeah, good luck
what she's
to
done, and so good luck to.
I hope her
good luck to
recovery goes really, really well.
Yes.
Katie Nichols, lovely talking to you.
And you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's a great message, isn't it, to check your breasts, really, really important. Now, do stay with us, because coming up, we'll have more on the future of Vladimir Putin as the United States warns of cracks forming in the Russian leadership.
But first, Jonathan Vautry has your Monday weather forecast.
Hello there. Very good morning to you. I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your latest GBNews weather forecast provided by the Met Office. A fresher feel to the new working week compared to the weekend for many of us, all thanks to westerly winds that are pushing in from the Atlantic, helping to spread much cooler conditions across the UK. Monday is also starting off on a bright note for many of us. There's a decent amount of sunshine first thing, but already starting to see some showers push their way in from the west, and we'll see further showers bubbling up into the afternoon. Some of those, particularly across the northern half of the UK, could be heavy at times, maybe with an isolated rumble of thunder as well. But for Wales, central southern areas of England, likely staying dry throughout the day with a decent amount of sunshine. For all of us, though, those temperatures will be down compared to the weekend and feeling fresher. Generally, highs around 17, 19 degrees further to the north and west, 22, 25 in the south and east. Those showers will ease their way off as we head into this evening, allowing for some late evening sunshine, though the sunshine could be hazy at times as this wispy cloud pushes in, and that's ahead of this band of rain that's going to start to arrive into Northern Ireland throughout the early hours of Tuesday morning. So turning quite damp towards dawn, temperatures falling down to around 12, 14 degrees Celsius, but the humidity is going to start building again as this cloud and rain pushes its way in from the west. Some of the heavier bursts are likely for northwest Scotland, northwest England and northwest Wales. It will turn patchier as it heads towards the east, and actually the far south of England towards the southeast could stay largely dry throughout the day, but generally cloudier compared to the weekend. Temperatures, again, largely around the high teens, up in the northwest to the low 20s further towards the south and east, but feeling that bit more humid and also quite breezy, particularly in the west as that rain moves in. Further unsettled conditions are likely as we head throughout the rest of the week, so further rain at times. Temperatures, again, holding up around the high teens or low 20s. Bye-bye.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think. Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss? Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Britain is told to prepare for the fall of Putin as America's top diplomat warns of cracks in the Russian regime.
Hello there, very good morning to you. 1 minute past 9. It's Monday the 26th of June. You tuned into Breakfast on GB News. Eamonn Holmes and Ellie Costello.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. Britain must prepare for the sudden collapse of the Russian leadership. That's according to government assessments, following an attempted coup. It comes as the US Secretary of State warns that the insurrection shows cracks in Putin's power.
People are more likely to die from treatable conditions in Britain than in other rich countries, according to a major new study, which links the problem to a lack of NHS resources. The Minister for Social Care, Helen Whately, told us the government had a plan for the future.
The other thing the government's going to be doing this week as we celebrate 75 years of our National Health Service is announcing a long-term workforce plan. This is a historic thing for a government to do. It's never been done before. It's planning ahead for the future needs over the long term of the NHS workforce to make sure that we've got the doctors, nurses and healthcare professionals we need to secure the future of our National Health Service.
The Duchess of York has undergone treatment for breast cancer after it was caught early during a routine mammogram. Sarah Ferguson returned to Windsor this weekend, where she's recovering with family.
The Prince of Wales will unveil a plan to eradicate homelessness with a pledge to make it his life's work to ensure everyone has a safe and secure home.
And bowing out in style, Elton John closes Glastonbury 2023 with an unforgettable performance before hanging up his microphone as he prepares to retire. And there's still time to have your say on everything we're discussing this morning. You can email us gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet us @gbnews.
Well, our top story this morning is that government assessments have warned that the UK should prepare for a sudden collapse of the Putin regime following the weekend attempted coup by the Wagner Group.
Yes, yesterday, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken said the insurrection showed that cracks are beginning to show in Vladimir Putin's power, and he warned that this isn't the end of the story.
Well, joining us now in the studio, Daily Telegraph columnist Madeleine Grant, who's with us now for her take on this and lots of other things making the news. Well, it was some story, wasn't it, in Russia at the weekend?
Just absolutely extraordinary. And the fact is that because of the way in which our modern technology operates, the way in which you can see everything playing out in real time on social media and on Telegram, it gives you this kind of unique glimpse into his unprecedented historical events as they happen.
Do you think that we will see a fall of Putin, as the Times is reporting?
Well, it definitely feels like the beginning of the end, doesn't it? Because even though obviously that coup seems to have been for now somewhat controlled. I mean, the situation really shows the extent to which Putin is isolated. The 25,000 soldiers that were in that mercenary group, I mean, the Russian army has effectively just lost all of those troops, because how could you now depend on them and rely on them to be trustworthy? And Putin was already a very suspicious man. It can't be good either for the morale of the ordinary Russian. I mean, the mercenaries got as far as 40 miles into the Russian border. And that must be very, very heavy on morale, especially when you can, in real time see the march.
I wonder what the ordinary Russian knows. Do they know what cause is being fought for? Do they know, with the control of the media and things, that the coup was attempted?
I think they will know that, because you have to remember that so many young Russian men are actually in the army, and they will be talking to their relatives. And there's also channels like Telegram, which can't really be controlled by the Russian government despite their best efforts. It's almost like the new media that now exist make it impossible for a totalitarian government to have the same level of control as they might have done a few decades ago.
What next, do you think, for President Putin? Because he has been made to look weak here.
Yeah.
He will not like that. And there will be fears, especially in Ukraine, that he will want to come back as this strong man and potentially escalate things there.
Yes, but I think the fact that they were able to get so far and so easily, it shows that, the Russian army has I think to a certain extent relied on bluster. It's relied on people being scared that they are stronger than they in fact are, and also that there is a nuclear deterrent that they would be happy to use. And I think this is yet another example that actually some of this power is a kind of Potemkin force. It's not actually real. And so I think what's probably likely is, I don't know exactly when this will happen, but it's now far more likely that there will be some kind of internal coup. When people hear coup, they think of some big popular uprising. It's more likely to be the generals come together with maybe some people from the FSB and, agree collectively that it's time for Putin to retire.
Yeah. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian armed forces must have been able to take advantage of the situation in some way.
Yes, I mean, it will certainly be fantastic for morale on the ground. Obviously, it remains to be seen because this this attempted coup dissipated, at least officially, pretty quickly. So there's many moving parts, and it's hard to know exactly what they'll make of it. But certainly, President Zelensky made much of it in his speech, and he also issued a call to, as he often does, half his speech in Russian, issuing a call to any Russian listeners that they have been duped and that it's time to accept the new reality on the ground, that Putin's force is unreliable.
Madeleine, whilst we've got you, I wanted to ask you about another story that we've been covering today, and it is this King's Fund report that was published this morning that said that people in the UK are less likely to survive treatable conditions such as breast cancer and stroke, essentially because of below-average spending in the NHS compared to other rich countries around the world. It doesn't make for good reading, does it?
No, it doesn't. And this is nothing new. I mean, there are often reports that come out that suggest very similar things. There was a famous report a few years ago from the King's Fund, which basically said that the NHS was doing quite well on many counts, except for when it came to keeping people alive. I mean, the interesting thing there, I think, is that actually, if you look at funding in terms of government funding compared to many comparable countries in the G20, Britain is actually not doing that badly in terms of government spending. The difference is that in many countries that perform better, they have greater levels of individuals topping up their own care, and they have a system that involves greater private and public working together, which we don't really have. We are very much a kind of public first, and then there's private health insurance elsewhere. So I think that might have something to do with it.
Hold your horses there, Madeleine. We'll be back to you very, very shortly because we've now got the Shadow Attorney General, Emily Thornberry, who I'm delighted to say can join us now. Emily Thornberry, a very good morning to you. The sun is shining. You have got some fantastic, some really interesting stuff I want to talk about today. Analysis by the Labour Party shows that so many households right across the UK, people who are struggling with all this controversy about the interest rates coming in, but apparently people are paying thousands of pounds more on new mortgages just because they live in the UK. Why is that? Tell us more.
That's right, Eamonn. I mean, it goes up to about £2,000 difference between us and the French, £1,000 compared to the Irish, and so it goes on, 800 compared to the Germans. And although Rishi Sunak keeps telling us that interest rates are high around the world, basically what's happening is that the British mortgage payer is paying more for their mortgage than most other countries around the world. So, as you say, why is this? We would say the reason is a simple one, which is that the economy is a mess. We have not had any growth. We have not had a government that's been interested in growth particularly. And then on top of that, we've had the kamikaze budget, which has caused such terrible problems in the short term for mortgage payers and cost the country a huge amount of money. So it's been a mixture of general incompetence and bumbling along, added to a terrible crisis that we all saw in the autumn.
OK, so if Labour
and a government that now doesn't seem to have any idea of how to dig ourselves out of it.
So if Labour were to come in at the next general election, what would you do to bring down those eye-watering costs of mortgages?
So what we would do is we would, I mean, there are two things, right? You've got the Bank of England who has a responsibility for interest rates, and then you have a government that is responsible for ensuring that the economic weather is one which is favourable to all of us. So there are two things that need to be done. So the things that we would be responsible for would be making sure that we have a competent economic team that is making proper decisions in the long-term interests of our country. We need to turn our economy around and we need to start growing. So we need to change our planning system. We need to make sure that we invest in green energy so that there are jobs in the right places, good quality jobs, security when it comes to our energy, so that we don't have to answer to Putin anymore for our energy, and we can create our own GB energy at home. And we need to make sure that we have always at the forefront of our mind is that Britain has huge potential and we need to unleash it. And we need to stop holding our country back and go for it.
Yeah, tell you who's going for it, the Prince of Wales, Prince William. Today, he's announced this campaign. It's more than a campaign. He says it's his life's work to eradicate homelessness. Now, I think nobody's going to disagree with that. Very laudable. I mean, it would be a very brave politician that would put their neck on the line and say that they could do that. But Emily, we could debate whether you should subsidise mortgages or not. That could go on forever. But surely the problem is overall, we simply do not have enough houses in this country, whether social or private. And could I ask you, why do you think that is?
I agree with you. The reason we have a housing crisis is we don't have enough homes. And so the answer to that is we just simply have to build more. And I think that what we've got is we've got a planning system which has essentially ossified. I mean, it's just kind of died on its feet. We have people making planning decisions who are the people who want to protect what they have. What we don't have is we don't have youngsters in the gallery who are in the public gallery watching councils making these decisions, actually influencing decisions that are made, because it is for a younger generation that we need to be building homes. And we need to be building them in the right places, and they need to be affordable. We need to make sure that we get councils together on a regional basis who are given the task of, you must provide a certain number of homes, they have to be affordable. They can't just be executive homes. We need to have homes for first-time buyers. We need to have homes that are social for people who can't afford to buy. You know, we need to make sure that we have a private rented sector. All of these things are just falling on their feet, and we need to have a government with a bit of vision who's prepared to stick their neck out and go for it.
Do you think William will get anywhere with this?
Oh, I think it's fantastic to see the heir to the throne taking this up as his number one priority. I think that it disgusts all of us to be in a developed country and for people to be sleeping on the streets. It is something that really gets under people's skin, and they can see that it is so unfair. If you don't have anywhere to live, you have no chance in your life. Your life is likely to be shortened, and you have no opportunity. You can't get a job without somewhere to live. You can't get someone to live without a job. I mean, this is always, the ongoing problem. So to see the heir to the throne using the power that he has to highlight this issue is fantastic. But what he needs is he needs to have politicians who will back him up, and it's such a shame that this initiative has not essentially come from government, but comes from the heir to the throne, who's able to do a certain amount, but he is limited. He needs to work with a government who puts it as one of their biggest priorities.
But you see yourselves as a government in waiting. Will you back him up? Will you back up the Prince of Wales? How are you going to support people on mortgages? And also, as you touched upon there, those that are renting and struggling to afford those costs?
Yeah, so the way that we support them, as I say, is by getting rid of the things which are in the way of the planning system, so that we're able to make sure that there are more homes being built. In the end, that's the most important thing that we can do to solve the housing crisis. Because as you've alluded to, it isn't just people paying mortgages who are really in trouble. There's also people in the private rented market who are also seeing their rents go up, because as their landlords have to increase the amount of money they're paying towards their mortgages, they're getting the money from the tenants. So it's everybody who is suffering as a result, apart from a small minority of people who are fortunate enough to have bought their homes and who don't have a mortgage now. But we need to look down the generations and see just how much people are suffering in their 40s, 30s, 20s, who simply either can't get onto the housing ladder or cannot afford to pay their rent.
Shadow Attorney General, thank you for your views. Thank you for highlighting that discrepancy on mortgages all around Europe. And we say thank you to you. We ask people to get in touch with us today about what they think. Emily Thornberry pointing out that you pay £2,000 more per year in the UK than in France for a mortgage, over £1,000 more than they pay in Ireland and Belgium. Mortgage holders in Germany and the Netherlands will pay around £800 less than families in the UK. Where is the rip-off happening, and why does it always seem to happen to us?
Yeah, well, it's eye-watering prices, isn't it? Madeleine Grant, you're still with us in the studio. What's your reaction to what Emily Thornberry was saying there?
Well, I think it's really interesting how Labour have really lent into how can you reform supply-side constraints, because I think they correctly sense that after the infamous Liz and Kwasi mini-budget last year, essentially that a lot of the wiggle room for borrowing and spending has gone. You know, we've seen what happens, and breaking away from that kind of IFS playbook is not really going to be possible for any government right now. So instead of making grand pledges about what they will spend, they're now pivoting to how can we change the planning system to make it easier to build. So essentially reforms that can happen without the government having to actually spend a penny. But actually, when it comes to mortgage rates, I mean, there's nothing that they can do that's differently, given interest rates are set by a central bank and they have no plans to change the relationship with the Bank of England.
OK. Madeleine Grant from the Daily Telegraph. Thank you very much indeed. Big news from us at 9:30 today. A new show, but the same old presenters. Yeah, it's... what are you calling yourselves, Bev?
We're GB Newsroom now. It's not going to be that different, let's be honest. It's a slightly new branding. It needed a little polish and a shake-up, so we've done that, but it's still just me and Andrew, I'm afraid.
Exactly.
Oh, fabulous. And what have you got lined up for us today?
Well, we're going to be talking about Sarah Ferguson. A big story, actually. She gets a lot of flack, doesn't she? And quite deservedly, in my view. But she's spoken out about the fact she's had breast cancer. Checked 2 weeks later, she's having surgery. OK, she was able to do private medicine.
This could reinvent her, gives her a cause.
Yeah, and she's done it on her podcast, and she's spoken out very powerfully and saying...
And bravely,
Yeah, she said, because cancer can be silent. You may not have any symptoms, so have your checkup, don't avoid it. So significant from her. Little upstage Prince William a little, of course, who's doing his big launch on housing today, but I think very important, Fergie.
And actually health, NHS, big story. This King's Fund report is fascinating into how we compare to other developed nations. We're going to be looking at that in a bit more detail. Rishi Sunak, in fact, is talking this morning during our show. I'm sure he times it specifically to come into our show.
To drive our viewers mad.
So he's going to be talking this morning. We'll see what he's got to say, because there are, as you've been discussing this morning, the NHS is in its worst state ever. And of course, the news over the weekend about Russia, about the coup, and I, for one, I had a momentary. Yeah, I had a momentary kind of think, brilliant, this is going to be the start of the end of the war.
But it could be worse, because those terrorists, they're
mercenaries,
terrorists.
The Wagner,
and a little bit of
Wagner
Elton John. I watched it. Most of it, it was brilliant.
OK.
Isn't he fabulous?
And he's 76.
Amazing.
76. Very good going. Thank you very much
Thank
indeed.
you very much, both of you. Looking forward to that, yes.
9:30 with Andrew and Beverly.
Well, still to come, we're discussing the warmer weather as temperatures continue to rise. That's next.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive, because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle.
Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamonn.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's going to be warm today. It was warm yesterday. It was warm the day before. Yesterday was the joint hottest day of the year so far.
Yes, and there's a hosepipe ban coming into force in Sussex and Kent from today.
Right, so all of this comes as homeowners call for tougher punishments for failing water firms after South East Water customers say they faced months of poor water supplies. Apparently the pressure goes down and there's all sorts of complications, and people in our area complaining about lack of pressure on this, which is to do with the lack of water that they hold in reserve.
Well, it's not good in this weather, is it?
Well, no, it's not at all. Our South East of England reporter Ray Addison has more on all of this.
You could be forgiven for thinking Britain has enough water. An island nation, we're literally surrounded by the stuff. And there's plenty of rain. Over the last 12 months, the southeast has seen 32 inches alone. And yet apparently that's still not enough. South East Water has now introduced a hosepipe ban across Sussex and Kent. The company's chief executive seemingly blaming the public for using too much water. Nusrat Ghani is the local MP.
That's just absolutely absurd. We've had a couple of days of sunshine, so people are obviously, I don't know, taking an extra shower. Who knows? It isn't remarkable. We do get a few days of glorious sunshine every year. Reservoirs are okay. This was South East Water's lack of forward planning to treat water to ensure it was in the system so people could have it if we had a couple of hot days.
From today, anyone caught using a hosepipe to water their garden, clean their car or fill their swimming pool could be slapped with a £1,000 fine. It's a decision that's received a mixed reaction from people here in Sussex.
The thought that this is our fault and we're all sitting around filling up our swimming pools, this is absolute nonsense. This is them trying to manipulate the story.
It will affect my life because I grow a lot of vegetables. I've got a garden. And so it'll be difficult to keep it watered.
Well, it is an emergency situation, I suppose, isn't it? So, I think people haven't got water to drink and wash with, so I think priority shouldn't be to go and water the garden or fill your swimming pool up.
Thank you. We'll pop it in the boot for you.
The ban follows a tough month for residents in Kent and Sussex, with many experiencing days of low water flow or none at all. It forced South East Water to set up bottle stations, handing out rations to desperate residents, many of whom blame the firm for their thirst.
The reservoirs, from what I understand, are all full, and if they can't get it out to us,
It's a poor show, I think. I would expect the South East Water to actually produce enough water for us all and mend the reservoirs and mend the pipes.
Gareth Owen Williams is a local Liberal Democrat councillor. He believes South East Water has failed to prepare for the growth in population.
They haven't built enough resilience in the system, and in the first hot week in June, suddenly, people are using too much water. They didn't see that coming, and we are, at Wealdon, we are the local authority, we are being forced to approve enough houses to please the government. They are supposed to be ready for this. So, where is their spare capacity? Where are their resources?
Whoever or whatever is to blame for the water shortage, people across Kent and Sussex now have to think twice before turning on the tap. Ray Addison, GB News.
Well, whatever the rights and wrongs, whatever you're doing with your water, be careful with it.
Especially if you're in Kent. That's it from us this morning. Thank you very much for your company. Izzy is back tomorrow from 6 o'clock. Back with you. Thanks so much.
See you then. Have a good day.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m.